In this video, we'll be taking a deep dive into the entire story of Springfield. Let's get started. Before we dive into how modern Springfield came to be, we need to start with its ancient history. And multiple episodes basically prove that Homer and his family are like universal constants that have existed forever. Think about it. Whether we're looking at cave paintings, colonial settlements, or the modern era, the Simpson family dynamics keep repeating throughout history. These are the same personalities, the same conflicts, just playing out in different time periods. The father who means well but causes chaos. The patient mother holding everything together. The rebellious son and the intellectual daughter. These patterns don't just exist in present-day Springfield. They've been running since the beginning of time itself. What makes this really fascinating is how the show keeps revealing that certain relationships and social structures are basically hardwired into Springfield's DNA, showing us that some things never change no matter what century we're in. Before we dive into how modern Springfield came to be, we need to start with its ancient history. And the Treehouse of Horror episodes basically prove that the Simpson family dynamics are eternal patterns that transcend time itself. When Homer accidentally creates a miniature universe in Lisa's science project in the Genesis tub, we see evolution happening at hyperspeed. And guess what shows up? Tiny versions of the same family structures and conflicts that exist in full-size Springfield. The miniature people worship Lisa as their creator, but they're still dealing with the same social dynamics, the same power struggles, the same family tensions that define modern Springfield. But here's where it gets really interesting. The Margical History Tour episode takes us through different historical periods, and we see the Simpson family playing the same roles in ancient Rome, medieval England, and colonial America. In every era, Homer is the well-meaning buffoon whose decisions cause massive problems. Marge is the voice of reason nobody listens to until it's too late. Bart is the troublemaker who challenges authority. Lisa is the intellectual who sees what's coming but can't stop it. These aren't just fun historical parodies. They're showing us something deeper about Springfield itself. The really wild part is how consistent these patterns are across millennia. In the medieval segment, Homer, the barbarian father, still prioritizes immediate gratification over long-term planning. In ancient Rome, Marge still tries to maintain moral standards in an immoral society. The power dynamics between parents and children, the class structures, the corruption of authority, all of it exists in every time period the show explores. This isn't coincidence. It's the show telling us that Springfield represents eternal human patterns. What's really crazy about these historical episodes is how they prove that certain places just attract certain types of people. Whether it's ancient civilizations or modern suburbs, the same character types keep showing up in the same location. The greedy rich man exploiting workers, the incompetent authority figure, the rebellious youth challenging the system, the intellectual ignored by society. These archetypes repeat throughout history because they represent fundamental human types that exist in every community. The Treehouse of Horror episodes take this even further by showing alternate universes and dimensions where Springfield still exists with the same problems. In every reality, Burns is exploiting people. In every timeline, Homer is causing disasters. In every dimension, the family is dysfunctional but loving. The show is basically saying that these patterns are so fundamental, they exist across space and time. Here's the thing about Springfield's ancient history. It's not really about the past. It's about showing us that the problems we see in modern Springfield, corruption, incompetence, family dysfunction, economic exploitation, aren't modern problems. They're human problems that have existed forever. The caveman version of Homer made the same mistakes as modern Homer. The ancient version of Mr. Burns exploited people the same way modern Burns does. History doesn't teach Springfield anything because the same patterns keep repeating. The prehistoric segments show this perfectly. When we see caveman versions of the Simpson family, they're dealing with the same basic conflicts. Cave Homer wants to relax and avoid responsibility. Cave Marge is trying to keep the family together. Cave Bart is breaking rules. Cave Lisa is discovering knowledge that others ignore. Even in the Stone Age, before civilization, language, or technology, the fundamental dynamics were identical. This establishes everything we need to know about Springfield. The town isn't just a random collection of people who happen to settle in one place. It's a pattern that keeps manifesting throughout history. The same souls keep finding each other, playing out the same stories, whether they're living in caves, castles, or split-level houses. Some things never change, and maybe that's exactly how they're supposed to be. This sets up the crucial truth about Springfield's history. The town's problems aren't bugs, they're features. They're built into the very concept of what Springfield represents. And understanding this helps us see why modern Springfield functions the way it does. Now, let's move on to how Springfield was actually founded, which reveals that corruption and lies were literally baked into the town's origin story. But before we continue, subscribe to our channel. Now, let's talk about how Springfield was actually founded. Lisa the Iconoclast reveals the shocking truth about the town's origins and proves that corruption and mythology were built into Springfield's DNA from day one. The whole thing starts when Lisa gets assigned to write an essay about town founder Jebediah Springfield for the bicentennial celebration. She's excited to learn about this legendary pioneer whose statue stands in the town square and whose wisdom is quoted constantly. According to official history, Jebediah Springfield was a heroic frontiersman who tamed the wilderness and established a community based on honor and hard work. Schools teach his sayings. The town worships his memory. His silver tongue supposedly convinced settlers to build their homes in this specific location. But when Lisa researches original documents for her essay, she discovers something that changes everything. Jebediah Springfield wasn't a hero. He was a murderous pirate named Hans Sprungfeld who tried to assassinate George Washington. The confession is written in his own secret diary, hidden in his childhood home. Lisa literally finds the silver tongue, an actual silver prosthetic tongue that Sprungfeld used after biting off his own tongue as proof of his crimes. The town founder was a fraud, a criminal, and everything Springfield believes about itself is based on a lie. What's really interesting is how the town reacts when Lisa tries to reveal the truth. Instead of thanking her for historical accuracy, they attack her. The Historical Society calls her a heretic. Random citizens threaten her. Even her own family gets nervous about her challenging the official narrative. Springfield doesn't want truth. They want the comfortable mythology they've always believed. The lie is more important than reality because the lie gives them identity and pride. Here's where it gets really dark. When Lisa presents her evidence at the bicentennial celebration, she realizes something about Springfield. The townspeople need to believe in Jebediah. Without the founder myth, they have to confront the fact that their town was built on violence and deception. Lisa makes the choice to let them keep the lie, declaring that the real Jebediah Springfield was the good man they believe he was. She protects the myth because destroying it would destroy the town's sense of identity. This episode establishes that Springfield's problems started at the very beginning. The town wasn't founded by noble pioneers seeking a better life. It was founded by a criminal trying to escape justice. Everything that comes after, the corruption, the acceptance of lies, the worship of false heroes, grows directly from this rotten foundation. Springfield celebrates a murderer because admitting the truth would mean admitting the town itself is built on fraud. The really tragic part is how this pattern continues throughout Springfield's history. Every generation covers up uncomfortable truths to maintain comfortable myths. The schools teach sanitized versions of history. The government hides its corruption behind patriotic symbols. The powerful exploit people while wrapping themselves in founder mythology. Springfield learned from day one that lying is easier than dealing with reality. What makes this founding story so perfect is how it mirrors actual American history. Towns across America have founder myths that don't match historical reality. Communities worship figures who were actually morally compromised. The show isn't just making fun of Springfield, It's exposing how all communities build identity on selective memory and convenient lies. Springfield is America in miniature, and its lying founder represents the gap between American mythology and American reality. This episode proves that you can't understand modern Springfield without understanding its origins. The casual corruption of Mayor Quimby, the exploitation by Mr. Burns, the incompetence of institutions, all of it connects back to a town founded by a man who reinvented himself through lies. Springfield's DNA includes deception, and that genetic trait gets passed down through every generation. Now that we've talked about Springfield's founding, let's talk about the people who actually lived there and how their personal histories shaped them into the characters we know today. But before I tell you about that, make sure you're subscribed. Homer's backstory. Starting with Homer himself, multiple episodes show us something really important about how Homer became the person he is today. And it all comes down to a pattern of sacrifice and crushed dreams that turned an ambitious young man into Springfield's resident couch potato. The Way We Was takes us back to Homer's high school years, and what we see is actually kind of heartbreaking. Young Homer wasn't the complete disaster we know in the present. He had dreams. He wanted to impress Marge Bouvier, the beautiful girl in his class who seemed way out of his league. He wasn't smart or athletic or particularly talented, but he had genuine passion and determination. The episode starts with Homer asking Marge to prom after she breaks up with her boyfriend Artie Ziff. Against all odds, she says yes. On their first real date, Homer takes Marge to miniature golf and shares his dream of someday owning a chain of bowling alleys. This is crucial. Young Homer had entrepreneurial ambitions. He wanted to build something. He wasn't just drifting through life yet. When Artie Ziff tries to force himself on Marge after prom, she calls Homer to pick her up, and he shows genuine respect and kindness. Marge sees something good in Homer that night, a decent guy who treats her right when the supposedly sophisticated guy revealed himself as a creep. But here's where the sacrifices begin. I Married Marge shows us the crucial moment when Homer's dreams started dying. The episode starts with Marge getting pregnant with Bart in the early 1980s. Homer proposes immediately, because that's what you do. He gives up his dream job at the bowling alley, the one step toward his entrepreneurial dreams, to work at the nuclear power plant, because it pays better and has health insurance. This is the first major sacrifice. Homer trades happiness for responsibility, passion for stability, dreams for family security. What's really tragic is how this pattern repeats throughout Homer's backstory. Every time something good happens, life forces another sacrifice. He loves working at the bowling alley, but he needs to provide. He's happy when Marge is pregnant, but he's terrified of failing as a father. He wants to be the fun dad, but reality keeps forcing him to be the provider. And Maggie Makes 3 shows this pattern reaching its peak. The episode starts with Homer finally escaping the power plant to work at the bowling alley. He's genuinely happy for the first time in years. He has his dream job with low pay but high satisfaction. Then Marge gets pregnant with Maggie. Homer has to go back to the plant and beg for his old job back. Burns forces him to remove all his motivational plaques and replace them with a demoralizing sign that says, "Don't forget, you're here forever." Homer covers strategic words with pictures of Maggie so it reads, "Do it for her." This moment captures Homer's entire backstory. He gave up everything he wanted to provide for his family. His laziness and drinking aren't character flaws. They're coping mechanisms for a life of deferred dreams. Mother Simpson adds another layer by revealing Homer's abandonment issues. The episode starts with Homer faking his own death to avoid cleaning up garbage. But it triggers his mother, Mona Simpson, to come out of hiding after decades underground. We learn that Mona left when Homer was young because she was an activist who went on the run from the law. Homer grew up without a mother, raised by Abe Simpson, who was emotionally unavailable and often cruel. Young Homer learned early that people abandon you, that caring too much leads to pain, that safety comes from not expecting too much from life. Here's the thing about Homer's backstory. Every episode that reveals his past shows us a guy who started with hope and got beaten down by responsibility and circumstance. He married young because of an accidental pregnancy. He gave up his dreams because his family needed money. He works a job he hates because it's stable. He drinks because it numbs the disappointment. His mother abandoned him. His father was emotionally abusive. His boss treats him like garbage. The lazy, stupid Homer we see in present day is actually the result of decades of systematic soul-crushing. So, it's come to this. A Simpsons clip show reveals Homer's friendship with Barney Gould, showing that even his closest friendship is rooted in enabling dysfunction. They met in high school and bonded over being losers together. When Homer gives Barney his first beer, it starts Barney's descent into alcoholism. Their friendship isn't healthy. It's two damaged guys helping each other avoid dealing with their problems. Homer doesn't have meaningful adult friendships. He has drinking buddies who help him escape reality. What makes Homer's backstory so perfect is how it explains everything about his present-day behavior. Why does he strangle Bart? Because his own father was abusive, and that's the parenting model he learned. Why does he forget important events? Because keeping track would mean confronting how much he's sacrificed. Why does he prioritize beer and TV? Because they're the only pleasures left in a life of obligation. Why does he stay at a job he hates? Because he learned that responsible fathers give up happiness for family security. The really controversial part is that Homer's backstory suggests he's actually been more responsible than most people would be in his situation. He could have abandoned Marge when she got pregnant. He could have refused to sacrifice his dreams. He could have left his family to pursue happiness. Instead, he stayed. He worked jobs he hated. He provided for 3 kids on a mediocre salary. His stupidity and laziness are survival mechanisms that let him endure a life he never wanted. These episodes show that Homer's laziness and drinking aren't just character flaws. They're coping mechanisms for a man who gave up his dreams over and over to provide for his family. His mediocrity is actually his sacrifice. Every beer is a small rebellion against a life of obligation. Every nap is a brief escape from responsibility. Every stupid decision is Homer trying to reclaim some agency in a life that's been dictated by circumstances beyond his control. Homer's backstory shows how sacrifice shapes character, but Marge's experiences reveal something darker: how low self-esteem and limited options can trap someone in a life they didn't fully choose. Marge's backstory. Moving on to Marge, multiple episodes reveal the tragic truth about how Marge's self-worth was destroyed early in life, and how meeting Homer saved and trapped her at the same time. The Way We Was shows us high school Marge as a sweet, somewhat naive girl with a crush on the sophisticated Artie Ziff. She's insecure about her appearance, especially her tall blue hair, which other students mock. When the popular wealthy Artie shows interest in her, Marge feels validated for the first time. Someone sees her as special. But on prom night, Artie reveals he only wanted physical attention, not a real relationship. He gropes her, ignores her objections, and makes her feel like an object rather than a person. This is the crucial moment in Marge's formation. She learns that the kind of man society says she should want, successful, educated, smooth-talking, can be cruel and selfish. When Homer picks her up after Artie's betrayal, Homer's genuine kindness and respect stand in stark contrast. Homer treats her like she matters. He doesn't expect anything from her. He's just happy to be with her. For someone whose self-esteem has been crushed by years of mockery and a traumatic prom night, Homer's acceptance becomes everything. Fear of Flying reveals another layer of Marge's backstory that explains her anxiety and need for control. The episode starts with Marge having a panic attack at the airport, refusing to fly. Through therapy, we learn about her father's abandonment and how it shaped her personality. Young Marge discovered her father wasn't the airline pilot she thought he was. He was a flight attendant who got fired and lied to his family about it. The revelation that her father was a fraud who abandoned them created Marge's deep-seated fear of men letting her down and her need to control her environment. But here's where it gets really interesting. That 90s show shows us an alternate timeline where Marge had ambitions beyond being a housewife. In the flashback, we see young Marge and Homer living together in the 1990s. Marge is taking college courses and discovering her talent for art. She dreams of becoming a professional artist. She's part of a creative community that respects her work. For the first time, Marge has an identity beyond being someone's girlfriend or potential wife. Then the relationship with Homer falls apart because he's immature and directionless. Marge begins dating her sophisticated professor, who appreciates her artistic talent and encourages her dreams. She's on the path to becoming the person she always wanted to be. But Homer gets his act together, forms a grunge band, and wins her back with a grand romantic gesture. Marge chooses Homer, drops out of college, and marries him. Her artistic dreams get shelved for family life. Jazzy and the Pussycats adds yet another abandoned dream to Marge's history. The episode starts with Lisa becoming interested in jazz music, which triggers Marge's memories of her own musical aspirations. Young Marge wanted to be a jazz musician. She was talented and passionate, but her controlling sisters Patty and Selma discouraged her, saying she wasn't good enough and should focus on finding a husband instead. Marge internalized this message and gave up music to become the person her family expected her to be. What's really sad is how Marge's backstory is full of people telling her who she should be instead of discovering who she is. Her sisters told her to lower her expectations. Artie Ziff treated her like an object. Her father was a disappointment who abandoned the family. Society told her that being a wife and mother was the proper goal. Every time Marge reached for something more, art, music, education, someone convinced her to settle for less. Meeting Homer represents both salvation and entrapment. Homer saves Marge from believing she's worthless. He genuinely loves her for who she is. He provides emotional support and never tries to change her. But Homer also represents the safe choice over the ambitious choice. Marrying Homer means accepting a working-class life in Springfield rather than pursuing her artistic dreams. It means becoming the patient wife who holds everything together rather than the artist who creates her own identity. The really controversial aspect of Marge's backstory is how it shows that her settling for Homer wasn't necessarily wrong, but it came at a cost. She gains stability, loyalty, and genuine affection. She loses personal ambition, artistic expression, and independence. The show never judges this choice, but it also never lets us forget what Marge gave up. Every episode where she takes a class or pursues a hobby reminds us that there's a person inside the housewife who wanted more from life. Marge versus the Monorail and similar episodes show Marge's intelligence and problem-solving abilities, skills that would have made her successful in any field she chose. But these talents get channeled into managing her chaotic family rather than building her own career. She becomes the voice of reason that everyone ignores until disaster strikes, then desperately needs. Her intelligence is valued only in crisis, not in everyday life. Here's the thing about Marge's backstory. It's a story of systematic discouragement and limited options. She was told she wasn't pretty enough. She was treated like an object by the right kind of man. Her father abandoned her. Her sisters sabotaged her confidence. Society offered her two paths: find a good husband or end up a failure. Every dream she had was dismissed as unrealistic or inappropriate. By the time she met Homer, her expectations had been lowered so much that his basic decency seemed like a miracle. Marge's backstory proves that she's not just the nagging wife. She's a woman who chose family stability over personal ambition because her childhood taught her that reliability matters more than dreams. Her constant anxiety, her need to control her environment, her inability to prioritize herself, all of it traces back to a girl whose father abandoned her and whose society told her that her worth came from serving others. She's not trapped in a bad marriage. She's trapped in a life she accepted because she was taught not to expect more. Marge sacrificed her dreams for family, but Bart's backstory shows he was trouble from the very beginning and never really had a choice. Bart's backstory. Now, let's talk about Bart. Multiple episodes prove that Bart's rebellious nature isn't just a phase. It's been his defining characteristic since birth, and it comes from desperately seeking attention in a chaotic household where being good means being invisible. Lisa's first word shows us the crucial moment when Bart's personality was formed. The episode starts with the family looking through photo albums and telling stories about when Lisa was born. We see baby Bart as the center of Homer and Marge's universe, their adorable first child who gets all their attention and affection. Then Marge gets pregnant with Lisa. Homer builds a nursery and converts Bart's old room. Bart watches his parents getting excited about the new baby, and he realizes something terrible. He's being replaced. When baby Lisa arrives home from the hospital, everyone crowds around her crib, cooing over how cute she is. Nobody notices Bart standing in the corner, watching his entire world shift away from him. His first words were, "Ay caramba," an expression of shock at being displaced. What happens next defines Bart's entire personality. He tries to get rid of Lisa. He suggests leaving her at the hospital. He tries to send her back. He acts out in increasingly dramatic ways, but his parents are too exhausted with the new baby to give him the attention he's craving. The only time they notice Bart is when he's causing problems. So Bart learns the fundamental lesson that will shape his entire childhood. Being good gets you ignored, but being bad gets you seen. Brother from the Same Planet reveals how deep this need for attention goes. The episode starts with Bart waiting in the rain for Homer to pick him up from soccer practice. Homer completely forgets about him, leaving Bart standing there for hours, soaking wet and humiliated. When Bart confronts Homer about it, Homer dismisses his feelings and refuses to apologize. This isn't an isolated incident, it's a pattern. Homer consistently forgets about Bart, breaks promises, and treats his son like an inconvenience rather than a priority. Bart's response is to hire a replacement father from the Bigger Brothers program. Tom is everything Homer isn't: attentive, reliable, interested in Bart's life. The boy thrives under actual parental attention. But here's the tragic part. Bart doesn't actually want a new father. He wants Homer to notice him. The whole scheme is an elaborate way to make Homer jealous and force him to pay attention. It works, but only temporarily. Homer makes a big gesture, Bart forgives him, and then the cycle starts again. Bart the Mother shows another crucial aspect of Bart's character. He genuinely wants to be good, but circumstances constantly push him toward destruction. The episode starts with Bart accidentally killing a bird with a BB gun. He feels terrible about it. This is important. Bart isn't a sociopath who enjoys hurting things. When he sees the eggs the mother bird left behind, he commits to raising them as penance for his mistake. He wants to do something good for once. Bart nurtures the eggs with genuine care and dedication. When they hatch into lizards instead of birds, everyone tells him to get rid of them. But Bart stays committed. He protects his lizards even when they turn out to be an invasive species that everyone wants destroyed. When the lizards end up saving Springfield by eating destructive pigeons, Bart finally gets recognition for doing something good. But it happened by accident. His good intentions created chaos that coincidentally resolved itself positively. This pattern defines Bart's entire backstory. He wants to be good, but good behavior doesn't get noticed. He tries to be helpful, but his efforts create disasters. He seeks approval, but approval only comes when he's funny or entertaining. Bart vs. Thanksgiving perfectly captures this dynamic. The episode starts with Bart and Lisa fighting over dinner table placement. Bart accidentally destroys Lisa's Thanksgiving centerpiece, which she spent weeks creating. He knows he messed up, but apologizing would mean admitting weakness. Bart runs away from home and experiences being homeless and forgotten on Thanksgiving. He sees what his life would be like if his family actually didn't care about him. The episode forces Bart to confront whether he wants to be the bad kid his family barely tolerates or find another way to matter to them. He chooses to apologize to Lisa, which is enormous growth for him. But the next episode, he's back to causing trouble because being good didn't fundamentally change how his family sees him. What's really interesting is how Bart's relationship with each family member shaped his personality differently. With Homer, Bart learned that getting his father's attention requires either spectacular failure or spectacular achievement. Mediocrity gets ignored. With Marge, Bart learned that her patience is infinite, but her attention is finite. She'll always love him, but never prioritize him over family peace. With Lisa, Bart learned that intelligence is valued more than personality. His sister gets praised for report cards while he gets yelled at for pranks. Bart gets an F reveals the educational system's role in shaping Bart's identity. The episode starts with Bart failing another test and facing the possibility of repeating 4th grade. Mrs. Krabappel has given up on him. Principal Skinner sees him as a problem student. His parents are disappointed but not surprised. Bart is surrounded by people who expect failure from him, so failure becomes his identity. When he actually studies and tries his best on the makeup exam, he still barely passes with a D-. His maximum effort gets minimum recognition. Here's the thing about Bart's backstory. He was born into a family where being the oldest son of Homer Simpson means inheriting low expectations. He was displaced as the center of attention when Lisa was born and never regained that position. He learned early that causing trouble gets more reaction than doing well. He's praised for being entertaining, but never for being good. His teachers have given up on him. His father is more drinking buddy than parent. His mother loves him but can't really help him. His sister outshines him academically. The really tragic part is that Bart isn't dumb. Bart the genius shows he's capable of competing with gifted students when properly motivated. He's not inherently destructive. Multiple episodes show him being kind, empathetic, and creative. But kindness doesn't get noticed in the Simpson household. Creativity gets channeled into pranks because that's the only outlet he has. Empathy gets hidden behind a tough guy exterior because vulnerability is weakness in 4th grade social dynamics. Bart's backstory reveals that his troublemaking is actually a cry for attention from a family too, overwhelmed to notice him unless he's causing problems. He's not a bad kid. He's a kid who learned that being bad is the only way to matter. His pranks, his disrespect for authority, his constant boundary testing, all of it stems from a boy who desperately wants someone to see him as more than just the problem child. But Springfield Elementary labels him a troublemaker, his family expects misbehavior, and society treats him like a juvenile delinquent in training. Bart lives down to expectations because nobody has shown him a better version of himself to aspire toward. Bart acts out to be seen, but Lisa's story shows how being the smart one comes with its own painful isolation. Lisa's backstory. Moving to Lisa, multiple episodes show the painful reality of being the smartest person in a family and town that doesn't value intelligence, and how Lisa's gifts became her curse rather than her salvation. Lisa's first word establishes the crucial dynamic between Lisa and Bart from the very beginning. Baby Lisa's first word wasn't mama or dada, it was Bart. Even as an infant, Lisa was reaching for connection with her older brother, but Bart saw her as competition, not companionship. From day one, Lisa wanted to be included, but the family structure left her isolated. Lisa's sax reveals the origin of Lisa's most important relationship, her connection to music and the instrument that becomes her emotional outlet. The episode starts with the family remembering how Lisa got her saxophone. It's 1990, and young Lisa is showing signs of being gifted. She's reading at an advanced level, showing artistic talent, and generally being curious about everything. But instead of celebrating this, the family finds it inconvenient. Homer and Marge are stressed about Bart's behavioral problems at school. The guidance counselor says Bart needs expensive therapy or medication. Nobody has time to nurture Lisa's gifts. Here's where it gets really sad. Lisa starts acting out in school because she's bored and understimulated. The school wants to suppress her rather than challenge her. They recommend putting her in remedial classes to make her more normal. In desperation, Homer and Marge take Bart to a child psychologist and essentially give up on helping him properly. On the way home, Lisa sees a saxophone in a pawn shop window and becomes transfixed. Homer buys it for her using money he'd saved for air conditioning because he recognizes that Lisa needs something in her life that's hers alone. The saxophone becomes Lisa's voice when her actual voice gets ignored. It's her way of expressing emotions that her family doesn't have time to hear. It's her talent that requires no approval from others. When she plays, she doesn't need anyone else's validation. This establishes the pattern that will define Lisa's entire childhood. She finds fulfillment outside her family because her family can't give her what she needs intellectually or emotionally. Lisa's substitute shows what happens when Lisa finally finds someone who understands her. The episode starts with Mrs. Hoover getting sick and Mr. Bergstrom taking over as substitute teacher. For the first time in Lisa's life, a teacher recognizes her intelligence and treats her like an intellectual equal. Mr. Bergstrom challenges her, respects her opinions, and shows genuine interest in her ideas. Lisa blooms under this attention. She's not just the smart kid, she's a person whose thoughts matter. But then, Mr. Bergstrom leaves, and Lisa is devastated. She runs to Homer for emotional support, but Homer has no idea how to help her. He tries to comfort her with jokes and simplistic advice. Lisa realizes in that moment that her father will never understand her on an intellectual level. He loves her, but he can't relate to her. The note Mr. Bergstrom leaves Lisa says, "You are Lisa Simpson," a reminder that her intelligence and worth exist independent of whether others recognize it. But 8-year-old Lisa isn't ready to be that self-sufficient emotionally. Lisa the vegetarian reveals how being different from everyone around her causes constant social friction and isolation. The episode starts with Lisa having an ethical awakening about eating meat after bonding with a lamb at a petting zoo. She decides to become vegetarian, which seems simple enough. But Springfield treats her decision as a personal attack on their way of life. Homer mocks her. Bart teases her relentlessly. Her classmates at school think she's weird. Even Marge, who's usually supportive, tries to convince Lisa that being different isn't worth the social cost. The breaking point comes at Homer's barbecue when Lisa ruins his pig roast by freeing the pig. She sabotages her father's party because she can't handle being around people who find her values laughable. Lisa learns that moral principles come at a social cost. Being right doesn't make you popular. Having ethical standards isolates you from a community that doesn't share them. She finds some validation from Apu and random celebrities, but her actual community, her family, her classmates, her town, sees her as a problem. Summer of 444 exposes Lisa's desperate desire to fit in and be liked, revealing that her intellectual identity is partially a defense mechanism against social rejection. The episode starts with Lisa being excluded from Bart's group at school. Nobody signs her yearbook. She has no real friends. Being the smart kid has made her a social outcast. When the family goes to the beach for summer vacation, Lisa decides to reinvent herself. She studies teen magazines to learn how popular girls act. She pretends to be carefree and fun-loving instead of intellectual and serious. It works. Beach kids like fun Lisa. She makes friends easily by hiding her real self. But Bart, feeling jealous of Lisa's social success, reveals her true personality to her new friends. Lisa panics, thinking they'll reject her once they know she's the smart, serious kid. The twist is that her friends accept her anyway. They like both versions of Lisa. But the episode reveals how deeply Lisa believes her intelligence makes her unlovable. She's internalized the message that being smart means being alone. Here's the really tragic part of Lisa's backstory. She was born with gifts that should have opened doors, but instead built walls. Her intelligence makes her the family's conscience, but nobody wants to hear from the conscience. Her ethical standards make her morally right, but righteousness doesn't bring happiness. Her curiosity makes her question things that other people accept, which makes her the annoying kid who won't just go along with things. Being special in Springfield isn't a blessing, it's a burden. Smart and Smarter reveals that even Maggie might be smarter than Lisa, threatening the one area where Lisa has value in her family. The episode starts with Maggie scoring incredibly high on an IQ test. Lisa has a complete breakdown because being the smart Simpson is her entire identity. If Maggie is smarter, what's Lisa's role? Where does she fit? Her panic reveals how fragile her sense of self really is. She's not actually confident in her intelligence. She clings to it because it's the only thing that makes her special in a family of underachievers. What makes Lisa's backstory so perfect is how it shows that intelligence without emotional support creates loneliness, not success. Lisa reads at a college level, plays saxophone beautifully, understands complex political and ethical issues, and consistently makes good decisions. But none of that brings her friends. None of that makes her family appreciate her. None of that gives her the emotional connection she's desperately seeking. Her intelligence isolates her because Springfield doesn't value intellectual gifts. It values conformity and mediocrity. The really controversial aspect is that Lisa's suffering isn't noble. She's not the misunderstood genius who will eventually be vindicated. She's a lonely kid stuck in a town that will never appreciate what makes her special. Her best-case scenario is escaping Springfield for college. But even that means abandoning her family and the place that shaped her. Her worst-case scenario is staying in Springfield and watching her potential waste away, like every other intelligent person trapped in that town. Lisa's backstory proves that being special in Springfield isn't a blessing, it's a burden. Her intelligence and sensitivity make her an outsider in her own family, and no amount of achievement can change that fundamental loneliness. She's too smart for Springfield, but Springfield is all she has. That tension defines her entire character and explains why she swings between trying to improve the town and fantasizing about escaping it. She's trapped between her intellectual understanding that she deserves better and her emotional need to be loved by the people she has. Lisa's intelligence isolates her, but we also need to talk about the supporting characters who shaped Springfield's world and show that everyone in this town is damaged in their own way. But before we continue, subscribe to our channel. Supporting character backstories. Now that we've covered the Simpson family, let's talk about the characters who make Springfield what it is. Starting with Mr. Burns, the man who literally controls the town's economy and lives. Rosebud reveals everything we need to know about Burns's backstory and how a lonely childhood created Springfield's greatest monster. The episode starts with Burns turning even older and having a flashback to his childhood birthday party. Young Charles Montgomery Burns was the son of a wealthy, emotionally distant father who gave him every material advantage but zero affection. On his birthday, young Burns received a teddy bear named Bobo that became his only source of comfort. But Burns's grandfather forced him to give up the bear to demonstrate strength and self-reliance. That moment, being forced to reject love and softness in favor of cruelty and power, shaped Burns into the man he becomes. He spent the next several decades amassing wealth and power to fill the void left by losing the only thing he ever loved. His empire, his cruelty, his exploitation, all of it stems from a child who learned that affection is weakness and power is safety. When Burns desperately searches for his lost teddy bear in the present day, we see that underneath the evil billionaire is still that lonely child. The Mansion family shows Burns's age and history more clearly, revealing that he somehow survived over a century through pure spite and evil. The doctors call him a medical marvel because he has every disease known to science, but they're balanced perfectly so none can kill him. Burns represents eternal capitalism, an evil that can't die because it's too rich to face consequences. His backstory isn't just personal trauma, it's a representation of generational wealth corrupting across centuries. Moving to Smithers, Homer the Smithers reveals his complete devotion to Burns and how that loyalty destroyed his humanity. The episode starts with Burns sending Smithers on vacation, and we see how utterly dependent both men are on their twisted relationship. Smithers literally organizes Burns' entire life from wake-up calls to choosing his meals. His devotion goes beyond employment. It's emotional obsession bordering on love. We learn from other episodes that Smithers' father worked at the plant and died in an accident, with young Smithers present. Burns essentially adopted Smithers as his personal servant, raising him to be the perfect assistant. Smithers had no chance to develop his own identity because Burns shaped him from childhood to serve. His homosexuality gets suppressed. His personal desires get sublimated into devotion to Burns. He's not just an enabler, he's a victim who became complicit in his own victimization. Moe's backstory comes out in Flaming Moe's and other episodes, showing a man whose dreams were stolen and who responded by becoming Springfield's resident cynic. We learn Moe was once a boxer until his face got destroyed by literally dozens of fights. He opened his tavern as a way to stay around the athletic community, but it became a dive bar serving functioning alcoholics instead. When Homer accidentally invents a delicious drink and Moe steals it, making a fortune off the Flaming Moe, we see Moe's desperation. He's so desperate to escape his failure that he'll steal from the one person who's closest to resembling a real friend. What's really sad is that Moe's temporary success makes him miserable. When his bar becomes trendy and successful, he loses the regular customers who were his only human connection. Moe's not actually equipped for success. He's adapted to failure. When he confesses to stealing the recipe and loses everything, he returns to his dive bar almost with relief. At least failure is familiar. Barney Gould's backstory from Mr. Plow is genuinely tragic. We learn Barney was a straight-A student at Springfield High with plans to attend Harvard. He was smarter than Homer, more ambitious, and had a real future ahead of him. Then Homer gave him his first beer. That single moment destroyed Barney's entire life trajectory. He became an alcoholic, dropped out of school, and spent decades as a functioning drunk living in his own filth. The friend who ruined his life became his drinking buddy. They enable each other's worst behaviors because that's all their relationship ever was. Ned Flanders seems annoyingly perfect until Hurricane Nettie reveals his backstory and explains the psychological damage underneath his cheerful exterior. The episode starts with Ned having a complete mental breakdown after a hurricane destroys his house and the community rebuilds it terribly. In therapy, we learn young Ned was a legitimately terrifying child, destructive, violent, impossible to control. His parents were beatniks who didn't believe in discipline. The only treatment that worked was 8 months of constant spanking by child psychologist Dr. Foster. Think about that. Ned's cheerful personality isn't natural. It's manufactured through borderline abusive behavioral modification as a child. He was literally beaten into perfect behavior for 8 months straight. He didn't learn coping mechanisms or emotional regulation. He learned to suppress everything that might be judged as bad. His religious fundamentalism is another form of external control replacing the spanking regimen. Ned can't handle genuine emotions because he was never taught how. His perfection is actually profound damage disguised as health. Principal Skinner's backstory gets revealed in The Principal and the Pauper, and it's so controversial the show itself tries to pretend it didn't happen. The episode reveals that Seymour Skinner isn't actually Seymour Skinner. He's Armin Tanzarian, a street punk from Capital City who assumed his dead sergeant's identity after the Vietnam War. The real Skinner comes back and exposes the fraud. Armin Seymour has been living a lie for decades, trapped in an identity that was never his, working a job the real Skinner was supposed to have, caring for the real Skinner's mother. The town decides they prefer the lie and legally changes fake Skinner's name to real Skinner, forcing the actual Skinner to leave town. It's perfect Springfield logic. The truth is inconvenient, so they simply reject it. But what this reveals about Skinner is devastating. He's been a fraud his entire adult life, living up to someone else's identity rather than developing his own. No wonder he's such a rigid, by-the-book principal. He's terrified that any deviation from procedure will expose him as the imposter he is. Comic Book Guy gets his backstory in various episodes showing he was once genuinely passionate about comics and pop culture before cynicism destroyed his joy. Apu's backstory reveals he was overeducated with a PhD, but ended up running a convenience store to get American residency. Principal Skinner lives with his mother because he's too damaged from Vietnam and psychological abuse to function independently. Groundskeeper Willie is a Scottish immigrant whose accent makes him incomprehensible and whose violent temper makes him unemployable anywhere else. What ties all these backstories together is a simple truth. Everyone in Springfield is damaged. Burns is a lonely billionaire. Smithers is his willing victim. Moe is a failed boxer turned bitter bartender. Barney is a destroyed genius turned drunk. Ned is psychologically broken disguised as religious perfection. Skinner is literally living someone else's life. Every single supporting character has a backstory explaining why they ended up trapped in Springfield, unable to escape despite desperately wanting to. These backstories prove that Springfield isn't just home to one dysfunctional family. It's a community of damaged people who found each other. The town doesn't attract well-adjusted, successful people. It attracts people who failed everywhere else and landed here because they had nowhere else to go. Springfield is where broken people go to stop falling, even if they can't quite get back up. Now that we've met the main characters, let's talk about the place that brings many of them together every day, the Springfield Nuclear Power Plant. This workplace is basically the economic heart of the entire town and the source of most of its existential dangers. The plant's origins and importance. Now, let's talk about the Springfield Nuclear Power Plant. This place isn't just where Homer works. It's literally the reason Springfield exists in its modern form. And Burns Verkaufen der Kraftwerk proves that the entire town's economy depends on one old man's whims and his willingness to keep the plant running despite it being a death trap. The episode starts with German businessmen buying the power plant from Mr. Burns. They're horrified by what they find: unsafe working conditions, environmental disasters, a workforce that doesn't understand basic safety protocols. The Germans plan to fix everything and run it properly. Springfield panics immediately. What's really telling is the town's reaction to potential competent management. They don't celebrate the possibility of a safer workplace or cleaner environment. They're terrified that efficiency might mean layoffs. The entire town's economy revolves around Burns paying just enough workers, just barely enough to survive. If the plant becomes actually efficient, Springfield loses jobs. The town needs the dysfunction because that's what keeps people employed. Safety and environmental concerns don't matter when economic survival is at stake. 2 cars in every garage and 3 eyes on every fish exposes the environmental nightmare the plant creates while showing how Burns avoids consequences. The episode starts with Bart catching Blinky, a 3-eyed fish in the river near the plant. The mutation is obvious proof of radioactive pollution, but Burns doesn't care about fish or environmental regulations. When inspectors threaten to shut down the plant, Burns runs for governor to gain the power to protect his business from oversight. The fish becomes this perfect symbol of Springfield's priorities. Everyone knows the plant is poisoning them, but shutting it down would destroy the economy. Here's where it gets really dark. Springfield accepts Blinky as normal. The 3-eyed fish becomes the local high school mascot. Kids draw pictures of it. The mutation that should terrify everyone just gets absorbed into Springfield culture because acknowledging the horror would mean confronting their complicity. They know they're being poisoned slowly. They know their children are drinking contaminated water and breathing radioactive air. But stopping it would mean losing their jobs, so they normalize the nightmare. The plant's role in Springfield's economy goes beyond just employment. Burns owns the power supply, which means he controls literally every business and household. If Burns wanted to shut down someone's electricity, he could ruin them overnight. The plant gives him godlike power over the entire community. He can raise rates whenever he wants. He can pollute freely. He can ignore safety regulations because the town needs him more than he needs them. Much Apu about nothing reveals another aspect of the plant's importance. It attracts immigrant workers desperate for American jobs, allowing Burns to exploit vulnerable populations with even fewer protections than native workers. The plant is Springfield's largest employer, which means Burns determines the town's employment rate, average wages, and overall economic health through his decisions alone. The really controversial part is how the show reveals that the plant is completely unnecessary for modern energy needs. Multiple episodes show the plant is outdated, inefficient, and produces more problems than power. But shutting it down would require Springfield to develop alternative economic bases, which would require investment, planning, and cooperation that the town is incapable of mustering. So the plant continues operating not because Springfield needs the power, but because Springfield needs the pretense of employment. What makes the plant's position so perfect is how it represents American capitalism's fundamental contradiction. The company providing jobs is also the company poisoning the environment and exploiting workers. Choosing between economic survival and environmental health isn't really a choice when families need to eat. Burns knows this and exploits it ruthlessly. He can threaten to close the plant whenever anyone challenges him, which makes everyone, government, workers, residents, dependent on his goodwill. The power plant establishes itself as Springfield's beating heart, polluted, dangerous, and absolutely essential. The town can't survive without it, which means they can't survive without Burns, giving him godlike power over everyone's lives. The three-eyed fish swimming in radioactive waters represents Springfield's bargain with the devil, except slow poisoning in exchange for paychecks. Everyone knows it's killing them. Nobody can do anything about it. The plant gives Burns power over Springfield's economy, but his real control comes from how he treats his workers at the facility itself, where exploitation becomes personal and daily. Homer's career at the plant. Homer's career at the plant is basically a masterclass in failing upward, and multiple episodes perfectly capture how someone completely unqualified can succeed through pure luck and the system's incompetence rather than through any actual merit or skill. Homer's Odyssey shows us how Homer first got his job at the plant, and it's telling that it happened through desperation rather than qualification. The episode starts with Homer taking Bart's class on a field tour of the power plant. During the tour, Homer causes a complete disaster that nearly creates a meltdown. Instead of this being disqualifying, it somehow leads to Homer getting hired as safety inspector. Think about that. Homer proved during the application process that he's the least safe person imaginable, and they gave him the job of ensuring workplace safety. But this makes perfect sense in Burns' system. A competent safety inspector would shut down half the plant's operations for violations. An incompetent safety inspector like Homer will pass anything because he doesn't understand what he's looking at. Homer's stupidity makes him the perfect employee for a company that doesn't actually want oversight. Simpson and Delilah shows Homer's brief moment of actual competence when he uses demoxenil to grow hair and suddenly gets treated like an intelligent person. The episode starts with Homer seeing a commercial for hair growth formula and desperately wanting to seem more professional. When the formula works and Homer grows a full head of hair, everything changes. His boss treats him with respect. His coworkers listen to his ideas. He gets promoted to executive despite having the same brain he always had. The only thing that changed was his appearance. What's really crazy is that Hair Homer is genuinely good at his executive job. He makes smart decisions, manages people effectively, and impresses Burns with his presentation skills. But none of this was because the formula made him smarter. It made other people perceive him as smarter. When Bart accidentally spills the formula and Homer goes bald again, he loses everything. The show is making a brutal point about how workplace success depends more on appearance and confidence than actual competence. Homer Goes to College reveals the plant's complete disregard for proper qualifications when they discover Homer never actually went to college, which is required for his position. The episode starts with nuclear regulators testing Homer's knowledge and discovering he's dangerously unqualified for his job. They force Burns to send Homer to college to get proper certification. Homer's experience at college proves he's intellectually incapable of understanding nuclear physics, engineering, or any subject related to his job. He fails every class. He causes disasters in the lab. He learns absolutely nothing. But here's where it gets interesting. The plant doesn't care that Homer failed college. They give him his job back anyway, because firing him would mean admitting they hired an unqualified person in the first place, which would expose them to liability. Homer's incompetence becomes protected because acknowledging it would hurt the company, so they just pretend he passed and put him back in a position where he could kill everyone through simple negligence. King-size Homer shows Homer gaming the system by deliberately becoming obese to qualify for disability and work from home. The episode starts with Homer furious about mandatory morning calisthenics. Instead of just complaining, he researches and discovers that if he weighs over 300 pounds, he qualifies for disability status that allows remote work. Homer systematically eats his way to obesity, destroying his health to avoid minor workplace inconvenience. The plant approves his disability claim and allows him to work from home, despite his job requiring physical presence to monitor nuclear reactions. What makes this perfect is how it shows the plant's priorities. They'll accommodate dangerous incompetence if it means avoiding potential discrimination lawsuits. Homer literally causes a near meltdown while working from home because he's too fat to press the keyboard and uses a drinking bird toy to repeatedly hit the Y key. The plant almost explodes because they were more concerned about disability compliance than actual safety. The Old Man and the Lisa reveals another bizarre chapter in Homer's career when Burns briefly recruits him as a business partner. After Burns loses his fortune and Lisa helps him rebuild it through recycling exploitation, Burns offers Homer 10% of a company worth $120 million. Homer turns it down because the money came from environmentally destructive practices. This is the one time in Homer's career where he prioritizes ethics over money, and it's presented as him making a profoundly stupid decision that his family will resent forever. Here's the thing about Homer's career at the plant. Every position he's held, safety inspector, executive, disability remote worker, he's been completely unqualified for and dangerous in. He's caused dozens of near meltdowns. He's been directly responsible for safety violations that should have shut down the facility. He's the embodiment of everything wrong with the plant's operations. But he keeps his job through a combination of luck, institutional dysfunction, and the plant's inability to admit they made a hiring mistake. What's really fascinating is how Homer occasionally shows genuine competence in crisis situations. When disaster strikes, Homer sometimes makes the exact right decision to prevent meltdown. His stupidity becomes an asset because he doesn't overthink. He just acts on instinct. The plant unknowingly benefits from having someone too dumb to panic during emergencies. Homer Defined crystallizes this perfectly when Homer accidentally prevents a meltdown by randomly pressing buttons in a panic. The nuclear industry celebrates him as a hero and creates the Homer term, meaning to succeed despite incompetence. Homer becomes internationally famous for an achievement that was pure random chance. He gives speeches about nuclear safety, despite understanding none of it. The industry lionizes him, because acknowledging the truth, that their safeguards failed and only dumb luck saved everyone, would undermine public confidence in nuclear power. Homer's career proves that the power plant doesn't reward competence, it rewards survival. His ability to cause disasters and somehow avoid consequences shows that the system itself is broken, which explains why Burns can get away with running such a dangerous operation. The plant has normalized incompetence to the point where Homer seems like a reasonable employee. Homer survives through luck and institutional dysfunction, but other workers at the plant show what happens when Burns actively targets someone or when the workplace culture crushes anyone who questions the system. Workplace dynamics. Now, let's talk about how the power plant actually functions day to day. Multiple episodes reveal that Burns has created a workplace culture based on fear, humiliation, and Stockholm Syndrome, where employees are too broken to leave and too afraid to demand better. Homer's enemy exposes this reality through Frank Grimes, an outside perspective that reveals how completely insane the plant's workplace dynamics really are. The episode starts with a documentary-style introduction to Frank Grimes, a man who struggled through a horrible life, putting himself through school while living in an orphanage and working multiple jobs. Grimes is exactly the kind of hardworking, qualified person America claims to reward. Then Grimes gets hired at the plant and meets Homer. He watches Homer sleep at his desk, ignore safety protocols, cause minor disasters, and generally coast through his job with zero effort. Grimes is appalled. He's worked hard his entire life for a mediocre position, while Homer stumbles into success through pure luck and Burns' indifference. What drives Grimes insane isn't just Homer's incompetence, it's how everyone accepts it as normal. Lenny and Carl are Homer's friends. Mr. Burns barely notices him. The other workers don't see anything wrong with Homer's behavior. What's really messed up is how the episode sides with Homer over Grimes. When Grimes tries to expose Homer's incompetence by tricking him into entering a children's design contest, Homer wins by creating a nuclear power plant that somehow works perfectly despite violating every engineering principle. The crowd celebrates Homer's accidental success. Grimes has a complete mental breakdown and gets electrocuted while imitating Homer's careless behavior. Everyone laughs at his funeral. The episode is brutal because it shows that the plant's culture has normalized dysfunction to the point where questioning it makes you the crazy one. Grimes is objectively right about Homer being unqualified and dangerous. But the system doesn't care about right. It cares about fitting in and not making waves. Grimes failed because he expected merit to matter. The plant's culture has beaten that expectation out of everyone except the naive newcomer who dies for having standards. The Last Temptation of Homer reveals another aspect of workplace dynamics. How even attraction and connection get corrupted by the toxic environment. The episode starts with Mindy Simmons getting hired at the plant. She's exactly like Homer. Loves donuts, loves TV, has the same sense of humor. They connect immediately because they're the same person. But Mindy is attractive, which creates a problem. Homer is tempted to cheat on Marge with someone who understands him better than his wife does. The workplace enables this potential affair. Coworkers encourage it. The plant sends them to a conference together in a romantic city. The culture treats infidelity as normal and expected. Homer choosing to stay faithful to Marge is presented as unusual and worthy of praise, which reveals how low the moral standards are. The plant's culture doesn't just accept workplace affairs. It actively facilitates them, because keeping workers distracted with personal drama means they won't organize or demand better conditions. Burns's heir shows Burns's contempt for his employees through his search for someone to inherit his fortune. The episode starts with Burns nearly drowning and deciding he needs an heir. Does he consider his loyal employees who've made his wealth possible? Does he think about Smithers, who's devoted his entire life to serving him? No. Burns holds a contest to find a child to adopt and train as his successor. He literally values random children over the adults who've worked for him for decades. What makes this even more insulting is how Burns treats the candidates. He tests children by having them fire their parents. He wants an heir who's completely ruthless and unattached to normal human relationships. When he chooses Bart and starts training him, Burns treats his own workers with even more contempt, because now he has an heir who represents the next generation of exploitation. The message to employees is clear. You're not even being considered for advancement. Your children might inherit my wealth, but only if they become as cruel as I am. Smithers' role in all this reveals the most toxic workplace dynamic. Homer the Smithers shows that Smithers isn't just Burns's assistant. He's an enabling victim who makes Burns's abuse possible. The episode starts with Burns sending Smithers on vacation because he's smothering Burns with attention. With Smithers gone, Homer has to handle all his duties, which range from waking Burns up to choosing his clothes to filtering his phone calls. The job description is less employee and more personal servant who happens to work at a nuclear plant. What's really disturbing is how Smithers craves this treatment. When he returns from vacation and finds Homer has taken his position, Smithers actively sabotages Homer to get his job back. He doesn't want freedom from Burns. He wants to return to servitude. The workplace has created such severe Stockholm syndrome that Smithers has romanticized his own exploitation. He sees being Burns's personal doormat as a privilege rather than abuse. The regular workers have similar dysfunction at lower levels. Lenny and Carl enable Homer's laziness because having an incompetent coworker makes their mediocrity look better. Charlie is so forgotten that he literally walks into nuclear cooling towers with no one noticing. The unnamed background workers are so beaten down that they don't even have personalities. They just exist as warm bodies filling space. Safety meetings are jokes where everyone sleeps. Training sessions are disasters where nothing gets taught. The plant operates less like a workplace and more like a holding facility for broken men waiting to retire or die. Deep Space Homer reveals that NASA comes to the plant specifically looking for average idiots to send into space to generate public interest. They choose Homer because he represents the average American slob, whose presence will make space travel seem accessible. Think about that. The plant's employees are so notably incompetent that NASA uses them as representatives of human mediocrity. Homer's co-workers celebrate this as if it's an honor rather than an insult. The really tragic part is that some employees actually are competent and could succeed elsewhere, but the plant's culture has trapped them. Lenny and Carl occasionally show moments of intelligence and skill, but they've been at the plant so long they can't imagine leaving. The golden handcuffs of steady paychecks and union benefits keep them locked into a workplace that's slowly killing them through radiation exposure and soul-crushing routine. What makes the plant's dynamics so perfect is how they mirror real workplace exploitation. Burns creates a culture where employees are grateful for mistreatment because it could always be worse. He pays just enough to prevent desperation while keeping everyone in debt. He provides benefits that would be lost if they quit, trapping them. He cultivates competition between workers so they blame each other instead of management. He dangles the possibility of promotion while never actually promoting anyone. It's a perfect system of control. The power plant's workplace dynamics prove that Springfield's economy is built on exploitation and acceptance of the unacceptable. Workers like Homer succeed not through merit, but through their ability to survive in a fundamentally toxic environment that crushes anyone who demands better or expects fairness. The plant's culture has normalized abuse, incompetence, and danger to the point where these things don't even register as problems anymore. And that normalization is exactly what allows Burns to maintain his empire. The plant shows Burns's control over workers, but his real evil comes from how he's destroyed Springfield's environment and squeezed every penny from its people through systematic economic exploitation and environmental terrorism. Let's talk about Burns versus the people of Springfield. But before we continue, subscribe to our channel. Environmental destruction. Mr. Burns isn't just a bad boss. He's an environmental terrorist who's been poisoning Springfield for decades. And 2 cars in every garage and 3 eyes on every fish proves that everyone knows it, but can't stop him, because their survival depends on the very thing that's killing them. Bart catches Blinky, the 3-eyed fish in the river downstream from the power plant, and the mutation is undeniable proof of radioactive contamination. Any rational community would shut down the facility immediately and demand accountability. Springfield does the opposite. They turn Blinky into the high school mascot. The normalizing of horror is Springfield's survival strategy. When state inspectors arrive to investigate the contamination, they find 342 safety violations serious enough to warrant immediate plant closure. Burns faces financial ruin and possible criminal charges. His response reveals everything about how the powerful avoid consequences. He runs for governor to gain control over the regulatory system itself. If he controls the government, he controls what counts as a violation. The episode forces a brutal question. What happens when the polluter becomes the lawmaker? Burns's campaign strategy is perfect cynicism. He doesn't deny the environmental damage or promise to fix it. He runs on a platform of prosperity and job security, reminding voters that shutting down the plant means unemployment. Springfield faces a choice between breathing clean air and feeding their families. When Marge serves Blinky at a campaign dinner and voters see Burns refuse to eat his own plant's contamination, he loses the election. But nothing actually changes. The plant stays open. The violations continue. Burns just pays some fines and goes back to business as usual. The old man and the C student takes environmental destruction even further. Burns creates a retirement home as a publicity stunt to improve his image for Springfield hosting the Olympics. When the Olympics committee sees elderly people forced to perform humiliating acts for Burns's entertainment, Springfield loses the bid. Burns retaliates by dumping all the retirement home residents on a barely floating raft and sending them out to sea to die. He literally attempts mass murder of senior citizens and faces zero legal consequences. But the environmental crime in that same episode is actually worse. Burns has been dumping nuclear waste into the ocean for decades, creating a toxic wasteland where marine life mutates and dies. Lisa discovers barrels of radioactive material just floating in the water. The coastline is poisoned. Sea creatures are deformed. Burns's response when caught is to increase dumping, because the attention will die down and everyone will forget. He's right. They do. Multiple episodes show the plant's emissions turning the sky green, killing birds mid-flight, and creating acid rain that dissolves playground equipment. Marge versus the monorail reveals that the plant has been fined $3 million for illegal waste dumping, pocket change for Burns, and he only paid because the government threatened to actually enforce regulations for once. The fine becomes a windfall for Springfield when a con artist convinces them to spend it on a faulty monorail instead of fixing the damage Burns caused. Springfield's acceptance of environmental catastrophe reveals something darker than ignorance. It's deliberate, informed complicity. They know Blinky represents genetic mutations from radiation. They know the green skies mean poison. They know their children are breathing contaminated air and drinking polluted water. But knowledge doesn't translate to action when action means economic sacrifice. Every parent in Springfield chooses a steady paycheck over their child's long-term health because immediate survival trumps distant consequences. The show never lets Springfield off the hook for this choice. When Homer and Marge discover Bart glowing from radiation exposure, they're briefly alarmed before returning to normal life. When Lisa presents environmental reports showing correlation between plant emissions and illness rates, she gets ignored or mocked. The town has collectively decided that slow death from environmental poisoning is preferable to fast death from economic collapse. Burns didn't force this choice on them. He just created the conditions where this was their best available option. Talk about a perfect metaphor for American environmental policy. Corporations poison communities while providing jobs, creating a hostage situation where victims protect their abusers. Springfield residents know Burns is killing them. They just can't afford to stop him. That's not ignorance. That's economic coercion disguised as free choice. Burns's environmental destruction proves that Springfield has chosen economic survival over their children's future. And the tragedy is, they know exactly what they're doing. The mutated fish becomes a mascot because laughing at the horror is easier than confronting complicity in their own poisoning. Economic exploitation. Beyond environmental crimes, Burns has economically strangled Springfield to the point where the entire town dances to his tune, and the relationship goes far beyond just employment. Burns' Verkaufen der Kraftwerk exposes this dependency in brutal detail when German businessmen buy the plant and immediately announce plans for efficiency improvements. Springfield doesn't celebrate potential modernization, they panic about layoffs. The town's entire economy has been built around Burns employing more workers than necessary at wages barely sufficient for survival. Efficiency would mean Springfield loses its economic foundation. When the Germans discover how catastrophically mismanaged the plan is, they're appalled. They find Homer literally sleeping at his post with a drinking bird toy pressing his keyboard. Safety systems are held together with duct tape. Workers don't understand basic procedures. The Germans want to fix everything, which would mean firing 3/4 of the workforce and paying the remainder competitive wages. Burns deliberately kept the plant inefficient to maintain maximum control over maximum workers. Mass employment through incompetence gives him leverage over the entire community. The Germans eventually sell the plant back to Burns for a fraction of what they paid, because they can't run a properly managed nuclear facility in Springfield. The town's entire infrastructure assumes dysfunction. Burns returns to power having learned that temporary loss of control only strengthened his position. Springfield is so dependent on his specific brand of exploitation that they'll actively resist improvement to maintain the familiar abuse. The Trouble with Trillions reveals Burns' personal wealth and how he's been evading taxes that should fund Springfield's infrastructure. When the IRS comes after Homer for tiny deductions, they discover Burns hasn't paid taxes in decades despite being a billionaire. Burns has stolen millions from the government in uncollected taxes, while Springfield schools crumble, roads deteriorate, and public services collapse. He's been siphoning money that should support the community while simultaneously positioning himself as the town's economic savior through plant employment. Burns controls more than just his employees. He controls Springfield's entire power supply. Every home, business, and institution depends on electricity from his plant. When he wants to demonstrate power, he can literally turn off the lights. Several episodes show Burns threatening blackouts to intimidate politicians or punish citizens who oppose him. The threat is never empty. People remember the time he actually did cut power to the entire town for 3 days because someone insulted him. His control extends into local government through Mayor Quimby, who's completely owned by Burns's campaign contributions. Quimby passes ordinances favoring the plant, blocks environmental regulations, and ensures inspectors look the other way during safety reviews. The government that should protect citizens from corporate exploitation instead facilitates that exploitation because Burns finances every politician's campaign. Democracy in Springfield is theater. Burns already bought the outcome. A Hunka Hunka Burns in Love shows Burns casually spending more on a single date than most Springfield families earn in a year. He buys a store's entire inventory of roses for one woman while his workers' wages have been frozen for a decade. He owns mansions, private jets, and priceless art collections while his employees qualify for food stamps. The wealth inequality is obscene, but Burns has structured the economy so that even discussing it makes you sound ungrateful for having employment at all. The plant's monopoly on employment means Burns determines Springfield's wage standards. He can pay minimal wages because workers have nowhere else to go. Every business in town pays low wages because they know workers can't leave the area. Their houses won't sell, their families are trapped, and the only major employer is Burns. He's created an economic ecosystem where everyone participates in exploiting everyone else because that's the only way to survive in his economy. His various schemes to increase profits reveal absolute contempt for basic human decency. He's blocked out the sun to force people to use more electricity. He's privatized public utilities and charged extortionate rates. He's bought up real estate and raised rents while suppressing wages. Every possible method of extraction gets deployed, and Springfield has no recourse because the systems that should protect them, government, regulation, law enforcement, are all either owned by Burns or too powerless to challenge him. The workers tried unionizing once. Burns crushed them by threatening to close the plant entirely and move operations elsewhere. The threat worked because everyone knew he'd follow through. Burns would rather destroy his own profitable business than allow workers to bargain collectively. The message was clear: accept exploitation or lose everything. Springfield chose survival. Economic dependency creates a prison without walls. Workers can't quit because there are no other jobs. Families can't move because their houses are worthless in a company town. Businesses can't charge fair prices because residents don't have money. Everyone's trapped in an economic system designed to benefit one man while keeping everyone else barely afloat. And Burns maintains this system through careful balance. Just enough wages to prevent revolution. Just enough employment to claim he's helping. Just enough fear to prevent organization. Burns's economic control proves that Springfield isn't a free town. It's a company town where one man owns everything that matters. The people's inability to escape shows how economic dependency functions as effectively as physical chains, trapping entire communities in cycles of exploitation they can't break without destroying their own survival. Smithers' role as enabler Smithers deserves his own discussion because his devotion to Burns makes all of this possible, and Homer the Smithers reveals something tragic. He's not just Burns's assistant, he's the mechanism through which Burns's evil gets implemented, and his loyalty has transformed from employment into something far more destructive. When Burns sends Smithers on forced vacation, we see the full scope of what Smithers actually does. He wakes Burns at a specific time with specific music. He selects Burns's clothes, schedules his meals, screens his calls, manages his appointments, handles his mail, and essentially makes every single decision in Burns's life except the major evil ones. Without Smithers, Burns would be a helpless old man, unable to function in modern society. Smithers translates Burns's vague cruelties into specific actionable orders. When Burns says, "I want that union organizer dealt with," Smithers arranges the firing, the blacklisting, and the legal paperwork to make it defensible. When Burns says reduce costs, Smithers calculates which safety measures can be eliminated without immediately killing everyone. Burns has the impulse toward evil. Smithers provides the competence that makes evil operational. The relationship started when Smithers was a child and his father died saving Burns's life at the plant. Burns took young Smithers as a ward, not out of gratitude or compassion, but because he saw an opportunity to shape a perfect servant from childhood. Smithers grew up in Burns's mansion, educated to serve Burns's needs, trained to anticipate Burns's desires, and psychologically molded to find meaning in servitude. He never had a chance to develop an identity separate from his role. Smithers' transformation from idealist to enabler happened gradually. Early flashbacks show young Smithers questioning some of Burns's crueler decisions. Burns would respond with a combination of manipulation, "I thought you understood me," and conditional affection, temporary warmth that disappeared if Smithers didn't comply. Over decades, Smithers learned that the only way to receive any form of love from the only father figure he knew was to facilitate evil without question. His unrequited romantic feelings for Burns add another layer of tragedy to his enabling. Smithers is in love with someone who literally doesn't know his first name, who treats him with casual contempt, who would replace him instantly if a more efficient assistant appeared. But Smithers has invested his entire emotional life into this one-sided relationship, creating a sunk-cost fallacy of the heart. Walking away would mean admitting that decades of devotion meant nothing. Staying means protecting the delusion that his loyalty matters. Multiple episodes show Smithers having momentary moral doubt that he immediately suppresses. In Burn is Heir, Burns searches for a successor and never once considers Smithers, despite his lifetime of service. Smithers helps Burns find a replacement, helps Burns prove that his decades of loyalty don't earn him consideration. When Burns chooses Bart and begins training him, Smithers watches the man he's devoted his life to selecting a random child over him. His response is to work harder to prove his worth, which is exactly the abused mindset Burns cultivates. Rosebud shows the one time Smithers refuses Burns's order, when Burns demands he steal Maggie's teddy bear, the one thing standing between Burns and his lost childhood comfort. Smithers finally says no. For a moment, he chooses basic human decency over obedience. But when Burns replaces him with trained dogs, Smithers comes crawling back within hours, apologizing for his momentary humanity. The brief rebellion only reinforced how completely he's trapped. The show makes clear that Smithers could leave. He has skills that would make him invaluable anywhere. He manages a nuclear facility, handles complex logistics, coordinates security, manages public relations, and solves impossible problems daily. Any company would hire him instantly. But leaving would require acknowledging that his life's work has been enabling a monster, that his devotion has been wasted on someone incapable of reciprocating. That psychological reckoning is more terrifying than continuing to serve. Here's the really insidious part. Smithers protects Burns from consequences that might actually change Burns's behavior. When Burns does something so egregious that even Springfield notices, Smithers fixes it before consequences land. He pays off victims, bribes officials, manages PR, and ensures that Burns never has to confront the full weight of his actions. If Burns had to actually experience the natural consequences of being evil, he might moderate his behavior out of pure self-interest. Smithers prevents that learning by making evil consequence-free. Thus, other employees at the plant resent Smithers because he's the one who implements their exploitation. When Burns orders wage cuts, Smithers sends the memo. When Burns demands forced overtime, Smithers schedules it. When Burns wants someone fired, Smithers handles the paperwork. He's the human face of institutional cruelty, the buffer that prevents workers from directly confronting Burns with their grievances. His competent management of Burns's affairs makes him complicit in every crime Burns commits. Smithers proves that evil requires collaboration. It can't function alone. Burns has the sociopathic impulses, but Smithers provides the infrastructure that turns those impulses into systematic oppression. Without someone to execute his schemes, protect him from consequences, and manage the details of exploitation, Burns would have been stopped decades ago. Smithers' devotion makes him not just an accomplice, but the essential component of Springfield's suffering. Now that we've talked about Burns' control over Springfield through environmental and economic exploitation, let's look at the relationships between regular citizens that exist despite the oppression. These personal bonds reveal that Springfield survives through connection rather than institutions, starting with the Simpson family dynamics themselves. Homer and Marge's marriage. Let's talk about Homer and Marge's marriage, which somehow works despite every reason it shouldn't. The Way We Was takes us back to their beginning and explains the foundation that's kept them together through decades of dysfunction. High school Marge was dating Artie Ziff, the sophisticated guy who seemed like her ticket to a better life. But on prom night, Artie showed his true nature. He groped Marge in his car, ignored her protests, and treated her like an object he'd purchased with dinner and corsage. When she called Homer to rescue her, he came immediately, asked nothing in return, and treated her with basic human respect. That contrast became the foundation of their relationship. Homer's appeal wasn't sophistication or ambition or intelligence. His appeal was genuine kindness and acceptance. He loved Marge without conditions or expectations. For someone whose self-esteem had been destroyed by years of mockery about her appearance and a traumatic prom night, Homer's unconditional acceptance became everything. He didn't try to change her or demand things from her. He was just grateful she existed and wanted to be with him. I Married Marge shows how that early love transformed into commitment through crisis. Marge got pregnant with Bart in the early 1980s, and Homer immediately proposed. Not because society demanded it, but because he wanted to be there for her. He gave up his dream job at the bowling alley to work at the nuclear plant because it paid better and had health insurance. This was Homer's first major sacrifice, trading happiness for responsibility, and he made it without hesitation or resentment. The episode shows them struggling through Bart's infancy, nearly divorcing, but choosing each other again when Bart was born and Homer realized his son needed him. What keeps their marriage alive through constant crisis is that neither expects perfection from the other. Homer is lazy, stupid, selfish, and forgetful. Marge is controlling, judgmental, and martyr complex prone. They both know these flaws intimately, but they also know that underneath the dysfunction is genuine love and commitment. Life on the fast lane tests this when Marge nearly has an affair with Jacques, her bowling instructor who gives her the attention and romance Homer never provides. The affair almost happens. Marge is dressed up, standing outside the motel where Jacques is waiting, ready to cross the line into infidelity. She has every reason to go through with it. Homer forgot her birthday, he ignores her needs, he takes her for granted daily. But at the moment of truth, Marge realizes that Jacques only wants the fantasy version of her, while Homer loves the real version with all her flaws. She chooses Homer not because he's better than Jacques, but because he's real, and their connection is built on decades of shared experience that no romantic fling can replicate. Secrets of a Successful Marriage examines their relationship from Homer's perspective when he teaches an adult education class and realizes he has nothing to offer except gossip about his marriage. He shares intimate details about Marge, her small feet, her fear of flying, her personal insecurities. When Marge discovers he's been exposing their private life for laughs, she kicks him out. Homer has to confront what he actually brings to the relationship. He's not smart or successful or romantic. His one contribution is complete and utter dependence. It sounds pathetic, but it's actually the truth. Marge needs to be needed, and Homer needs her desperately enough to prove her value. The recurring pattern in their marriage is Homer screwing up catastrophically and Marge forgiving him after he makes some grand gesture proving he cares. This cycle is simultaneously the marriage's biggest strength and biggest problem. Homer never has to fundamentally change because Marge's forgiveness comes eventually. Marge never has to demand more because Homer's occasional efforts seem meaningful against the baseline of neglect. They're stuck in a dysfunction that works just well enough to prevent either from leaving. But here's what the show respects about their relationship. It's based on choice, not obligation. Multiple episodes show Marge capable of leaving and choosing to stay. Multiple episodes show Homer genuinely devastated at the thought of losing her. They're not together because they're trapped by kids or money or social pressure. They're together because after seeing each other at their absolute worst for decades, they still choose each other. That's not romantic comedy love. That's the kind of love that actually survives real life. The Last Temptation of Homer reinforces this when Homer meets Mindy Simmons, a woman who's basically his female counterpart. She loves donuts, TV, and has his exact sense of humor. They connect instantly on a level Homer never experienced with Marge. When the plant sends them to a romantic conference together, Homer has to choose between the woman who understands him and the woman he made promises to. He chooses Marge because their marriage is built on commitment that transcends momentary compatibility. The show never pretends their marriage is healthy by conventional standards. Homer strangles their son. Marge enables Homer's alcoholism by never demanding he change. They communicate poorly, fight constantly, and hurt each other through carelessness and resentment. But they also genuinely love each other in a way that survived poverty, addiction, infidelity, temptations, family trauma, and decades of disappointment. Their marriage works because both partners know what they have. Imperfect love from an imperfect person who's trying their best with limited tools. Homer and Marge prove that marriage isn't about finding a perfect partner. It's about choosing an imperfect partner and building something real despite the flaws. Their relationship survives because Marge sees the man Homer wants to be, and Homer knows he doesn't deserve her but tries anyway, and sometimes that's enough. Homer and Bart's bond. Homer's relationship with Bart reveals another kind of struggle. Father and son who are actually very similar but can't seem to understand each other at all. Bart gets an F shows Homer trying to parent a son who reminds him of his own failures. Bart is failing 4th grade, and Homer sees himself, the underachieving kid everyone gave up on. Homer wants to help but doesn't know how because his own father never helped him. He tries discipline, gets frustrated, considers giving up. When Bart finally passes with a D- after genuinely trying his hardest, Homer celebrates like Bart won a Nobel Prize because he recognizes that effort, not just results. Bart the Daredevil exposes the core dynamic between them. Bart becomes obsessed with Daredevil stunts after seeing Truckosaurus, and Homer tries to stop him from jumping Springfield Gorge on his skateboard. Not because he thinks it's dangerous, Homer has survived worse through luck, but because he recognizes his own reckless impulsiveness in Bart and doesn't want his son to suffer for it. When Homer confiscates Bart's skateboard and Bart sneaks out anyway, Homer races to stop him. Here's where it gets interesting. Homer jumps the gorge himself to prove how dangerous it is. He wants to show Bart the consequences of reckless behavior by experiencing them himself. Homer crashes catastrophically, breaks every bone in his body, gets loaded into an ambulance that immediately crashes again, sending him back down the gorge. Bart watches his father get destroyed trying to protect him. The lesson works. Bart gives up daredevil stunts. Homer's parenting method is insane but effective because Bart finally understood his father cares enough to literally break himself to keep Bart safe. Bart on the Road shows their relationship from a different angle. Bart takes a fake driver's license and road trips with friends, running out of money in Knoxville. Instead of calling Marge, who would be disappointed, Bart calls Homer for help. Homer covers for him, lies to Marge, and helps Bart get home without facing consequences. This isn't good parenting. It's Homer remembering what it felt like to be young and stupid, and knowing that sometimes kids need rescue without judgment. Their bond strengthens because Bart learns his father will protect him even when he messes up. The conflict comes from both wanting the other's approval but being too proud to admit it. Homer wants Bart to think he's cool, to admire him, to choose him over Marge. Bart wants Homer to be proud of him, to recognize his achievements, to see him as more than the problem child. But neither can express these needs directly, so they communicate through elaborate schemes, physical comedy, and occasional moments of genuine connection. Brother's little helper tackles their relationship through Bart's ADD medication. Homer resists medicating his son because it feels like giving up on who Bart naturally is. When Bart takes Focuslin and becomes docile and obedient, Homer initially celebrates, but he quickly realizes he misses the chaotic, impulsive, rebellious Bart. The medicated version is easier to manage but lacks the spark that makes Bart himself. Homer wants his son to succeed, but not at the cost of losing his personality. What makes their bond work despite constant friction is that they're the same person separated by 30 years, both impulsive, both proud, both desperate for approval they won't admit wanting. When they fight, it's like watching someone argue with their own reflection. When they connect, it's because they recognize themselves in each other. Homer doesn't know how to be a good father because Abe Simpson was terrible at it. But Homer shows up, which is more than his father did. Bart resents Homer's parenting, but knows that Homer tries, which counts for something. The show lets their relationship be messy, without resolving it into sitcom lessons. Sometimes Homer is too rough with Bart. Sometimes Bart pushes Homer too far. They hurt each other regularly through carelessness and misunderstanding. But there's genuine love underneath the dysfunction, awkward hugs after fights, Homer defending Bart against the world, Bart choosing Homer's approval over peer acceptance when it really matters. Their relationship proves that parenting is showing up even when you don't know what you're doing. They clash because they're more similar than either wants to admit. Both impulsive, both proud, both desperately wanting connection, but terrible at expressing it. The strangulation running gag is darker than the show acknowledges, but it represents Homer's frustrated inability to parent properly. He's trying his best with tools he was never given. Homer and Lisa's connection. Homer and Lisa's relationship is one of Springfield's most beautiful mysteries, because a dumb man and a genius girl somehow connect on a level deeper than intelligence. Lisa's pony shows Homer's capacity for sacrifice when it comes to Lisa's happiness. After missing Lisa's saxophone recital and seeing her devastated disappointment, Homer realizes he's failed her in a fundamental way. His solution is to buy her the one thing she wants, but they can't afford, a pony. To pay for it, Homer works 2 jobs, sleeping about 45 minutes per night for weeks. The sacrifice nearly kills him. He falls asleep at the power plant, at the Quickie Mart, while driving. Marge begs him to give up the pony, but Homer won't, because keeping his promise to Lisa matters more than his health or comfort or marriage. When Lisa realizes what her father is doing to afford the pony, she chooses to give it up. Not because she doesn't want it, but because she understands the cost. That mutual sacrifice, Homer giving everything to make Lisa happy, Lisa giving up her happiness to save her father, defines their relationship. Lisa's substitute captures another crucial moment. Mr. Bergstrom leaves, and Lisa is heartbroken about losing the one teacher who understood her. She runs to Homer for comfort, expecting sophisticated empathy. Homer has no idea what to say. He tries jokes, simple platitudes, totally inadequate words. Lisa calls him a baboon and runs away crying. But Homer follows her, sits with her, and says the only thing he knows, "You know, you'll always be Daddy's little girl." It's not intellectual comfort, it's emotional presence. Lisa realizes her father loves her even if he doesn't understand her, and sometimes that's enough. Homer reveals that Homer made a massive sacrifice Lisa never knew about. A crayon lodged in Homer's brain has been suppressing his intelligence his whole life. When doctors remove it, Homer becomes genuinely smart, reading at advanced levels, understanding complex concepts, connecting with Lisa intellectually. They bond over smart things. But Homer also becomes miserable because intelligence means seeing clearly how terrible his life is. He can't enjoy beer or TV or his friends anymore. He asks Moe to put the crayon back in, deliberately choosing stupidity over intelligence because being smart makes him too sad to function. The devastating part is the note Homer writes to Lisa before the procedure. I'm taking the coward's way out, but before I do, I just want to say, being smart made me appreciate just how amazing you really are. He chose stupidity so he could continue being her father without the constant awareness of his inadequacy. Lisa finds the note and understands her father gave up intelligence, gave up connection with her on that level, to remain functional for the family. His stupidity is partly sacrifice. Lisa the Simpson shows Homer supporting Lisa through an identity crisis. She discovers the Simpson gene, makes all Simpson males stupid, and worries she'll become dumb too. Homer tries to comfort her with examples of smart Simpson women, accidentally proving that being a Simpson means fighting against genetic limitations. His attempt fails intellectually, but succeeds emotionally. Lisa realizes her father accepts her intelligence even though it intimidates him, even though it highlights how different they are. Their relationship works because neither expects the other to change who they are. Lisa doesn't need Homer to be smart. She needs him to value her intelligence. Homer doesn't need Lisa to dumb down. He needs her to still love him despite his limitations. Maximum Homer Drive shows this when Homer and Bart go on a truck driving adventure, and Lisa gives him detailed shipping route calculations. Homer doesn't understand the math, but he trusts her expertise and follows her advice. That respect across the intelligence gap is what makes their bond real. The show treats their relationship with genuine tenderness that's rare in their family. Homer never strangles Lisa. She never cruelly mocks his stupidity. They exist in a pocket of mutual respect within the family's dysfunction. When Homer succeeds at something, Lisa's pride is genuine. When Lisa achieves something intellectual, Homer brags about her, even though he doesn't understand what she did. They're each other's biggest fans, despite having almost nothing in common. Homer and Lisa prove that love doesn't require understanding. It requires showing up and caring even when you're lost. Homer might not comprehend Lisa's intellect, but he recognizes her worth and supports her dreams, which is more than most smart people give her. Their bond survives because Homer makes Lisa feel valued for being herself, and Lisa makes Homer feel like he's good at something, being her dad. Bart and Lisa's rivalry. Bart and Lisa's relationship defines sibling rivalry through two completely different people who fight constantly but also protect each other fiercely. Bart versus Thanksgiving captures their dynamic perfectly. Lisa spends weeks creating an elaborate Thanksgiving centerpiece for the dinner table. Bart accidentally destroys it during a fight over table placement. He knows he messed up. She knows he knows. But Bart's pride won't let him apologize because admitting fault means losing power in their eternal competition. Bart runs away from home and spends Thanksgiving watching homeless people at a soup kitchen. For the first time, he experiences what his life would be like if his family actually didn't care about him. The homeless people are kind to him, share their food, but they're not family. Bart realizes the difference between people who temporarily care and people who permanently care, even when they're angry with you. He goes home and apologizes to Lisa, which represents enormous growth because Bart rarely admits he's wrong. Lisa on ice explores their rivalry through sports competition. Lisa joins hockey and discovers she's naturally talented. Bart has always been the athletic sibling, while Lisa was the academic one. Suddenly, his territory is invaded. Their teams face off in a championship game, and the entire town picks sides. The competition becomes vicious. Bart and Lisa genuinely try to hurt each other on the ice. The anger is real. But at the crucial moment when they're about to fight, they remember childhood and choose each other over victory. The game ends in a tie, and they walk off together while everyone else riots. What makes this perfect is that neither had to lose for the other to win. They both won by choosing their relationship over competition. But the next episode They're back to fighting because one moment of clarity doesn't erase years of established rivalry. Their bond isn't built on constant harmony, it's built on choosing each other when it really matters, even if they go back to fighting immediately afterward. Bart sells his soul shows Lisa protecting Bart's emotions despite their conflicts. Bart sells his soul to Milhouse as a joke and pretends it doesn't bother him when he starts feeling empty inside. Lisa knows what he's going through but initially refuses to help because he mocked her belief in souls. When she finally sees Bart genuinely suffering, she buys his soul back from Milhouse and returns it to him. She saved him, even though he wouldn't have done the same for her at that point in his development. Their rivalry stems from representing opposite values in a household that can only reward one type of excellence at a time. Lisa gets praised for grades and accomplishments. Bart gets attention for entertainment and chaos. They're competing for different resources, but in a family with limited emotional bandwidth, any attention given to one feels stolen from the other. Their fights are about establishing worth in a home where excellence is defined narrowly. Summer of Forfeiture 2 reveals Bart's jealousy when Lisa successfully reinvents herself as popular at the beach. She's making friends easily by hiding her intelligence and acting carefree. Bart feels threatened watching his nerdy sister succeed socially while he's been the charismatic one their whole lives. He exposes her true personality to her new friends, expecting them to reject her. His cruelty comes from fear that if Lisa can be popular and smart, what does that make him? But here's what the show understands about their relationship. They need each other as counterbalance. Lisa needs Bart to keep her from becoming too self-serious and isolated in her intellectualism. Bart needs Lisa to remind him that intelligence and ethics matter beyond social approval. They make each other better by forcing each other to engage with opposing worldviews. Lisa would be insufferable without Bart puncturing her self-righteousness. Bart would be immoral without Lisa challenging his behavior. Their bond is complicated by both genuinely seeing the other's good qualities while resenting those same qualities. Lisa knows Bart is naturally charismatic and socially intelligent in ways she'll never be. Bart knows Lisa is genuinely brilliant and will escape Springfield while he's probably stuck forever. They each have what the other wants, which creates resentment, but they also recognize each other's worth more clearly than anyone else in the family does. The show lets them be mean to each other without constantly teaching lessons about sibling love. They physically fight. They sabotage each other's achievements. They compete for parental attention ruthlessly. But when outsiders threaten either of them, they become a unified force. Bart defends Lisa from bullies. Lisa covers for Bart with teachers. Their rivalry is internal. Externally, they're a team. Bart and Lisa prove that sibling rivalry is just love wearing combat boots. They fight because they care enough to engage with each other, and their differences make them stronger together than apart. The rivalry will never end because it's built into who they are, but it's also the relationship that will last longer than any other in their lives. Friendships in Springfield. Now, let's talk about Springfield's friendships, which are just as dysfunctional and codependent as the family relationships, starting with Homer and Barney. Mr. Plow exposes their friendship as mutual enabling disguised as loyalty. Homer and Barney were high school friends who bonded over being losers together. When Homer gave Barney his first beer at their high school graduation party, it started Barney's descent into alcoholism. Barney was a straight-A student headed to Harvard. One beer destroyed that entire trajectory. Now they drink together at Moe's Tavern every night, helping each other avoid dealing with their problems. Their friendship only works because neither expects growth from the other. When Homer starts a plow business, Barney immediately becomes his competitor instead of supporting him. They sabotage each other's businesses, air attack ads on TV, and nearly destroy their friendship over snow removal contracts. The competition reveals they're not actually friends in the sense of wanting the best for each other. They're drinking buddies who help each other escape reality. When the crisis ends, they go back to the bar together because dysfunction is the relationship's foundation. Homer's friendship with Lenny and Carl follows the same pattern. Homer's Night Out, and countless other episodes show these three enabling each other's worst behaviors. They skip work together. They lie to their families together. They encourage each other to avoid responsibility. When one suggests something stupid, the others agree instead of being voices of reason. Their workplace friendship exists because misery loves company. They're all trapped in dead-end jobs, so they make that trap more bearable through shared mediocrity. But here's what's real about these friendships. They show up for each other. When Homer needs help, Lenny and Carl are there. When someone attacks one of them, the others defend him. Their loyalty isn't sophisticated or healthy, but it's genuine. They accept each other's flaws completely because they're all equally flawed. There's no pretense or judgment, just three guys surviving Springfield together. Marge's friendships are more complicated because she's constantly trying to be the moral center of Springfield, which makes real friendship difficult. Marge on the Lam introduces Ruth Powers, who briefly becomes Marge's friend by encouraging her to break rules. They go out without their husbands, stay out late, take Ruth's ex-husband's car without permission. Marge thrives on the minor rebellion. But when the night turns into an actual crime with police chasing them, Marge realizes she can't maintain friendships built on breaking the rules she's spent her life following. The episode reveals Marge's fundamental loneliness. She has no real friends because being everyone's conscience prevents genuine connection. People come to Marge when they need moral advice or emotional labor, but nobody wants to hang out with the person who reminds them of their failures. Ruth Powers represented a possibility of friendship without judgment, but even that required Marge to become someone she's not. Lisa's friendships expose the cruelty of childhood social hierarchies. Lisa's rival introduces Allison Taylor, a girl smarter than Lisa who threatens her identity as the school's top student. Instead of befriending someone who finally understands her intellectually, Lisa becomes consumed with competition. She sabotages Allison's diorama project, wins through cheating, but can't enjoy the victory because she compromised her ethics. When they eventually become friends, it's because Lisa learned that other smart kids aren't threats. They're potential allies in a world that doesn't value intelligence. But Lisa's friendships never last. Smart kids move away. Temporary friends reveal themselves as shallow. Adults who befriend her, substitute teachers, musicians, intellectuals, always leave because they're not permanently trapped in Springfield like she is. Summer of 442 shows Lisa attempting to create friendships by hiding her true self, which works until Bart exposes her. The friends accept her anyway, but Lisa learns that every friendship requires hiding parts of herself to remain palatable to others. Bart's friendship with Milhouse reveals a different dynamic, the popular kid and the hanger-on creating a relationship based on inequality. Bart sells his soul, and countless episodes show Bart treating Milhouse terribly, while Milhouse keeps coming back, because Bart's attention is better than no friends at all. When Bart actually needs Milhouse, their friendship works. When Bart is bored or angry, he takes it out on Milhouse without consequence. It's not healthy friendship, it's hierarchical companionship where one person holds all the power. But occasionally Milhouse stands up to Bart, and those moments create genuine respect. When Milhouse's parents divorce and he becomes darkly cynical, Bart actually appreciates him more. When Milhouse gets a girlfriend in Canada, allegedly, Bart is impressed. Their friendship improves when the power dynamic shifts toward equality, but inequality is more comfortable for both of them. The adult friendships at Moe's Tavern deserve attention because they represent Springfield's social structure for working-class men. Moe's is where men go to escape families, jobs, and responsibilities. The regulars, Homer, Barney, Lenny, Carl, Sam, Larry, form a community based on shared failure and alcohol-facilitated honesty. They mock each other, share problems, offer terrible advice, and drink until problems seem manageable. It's therapy for people who would never attend actual therapy. Moe himself is part of the friendship group despite being the bartender. He shares his loneliness, his failed suicide attempts, his desperate dating stories. The regulars keep coming back, partly because Moe needs them as much as they need the bar. When Moe's becomes temporarily successful and trendy in Flaming Moe's, The regulars feel abandoned. The bar works because it's a loser space. Success would destroy the dynamic that makes it home. What ties all Springfield friendships together is proximity rather than compatibility. People become friends because they're stuck together in a small town with limited options. Homer and Barney are friends because they were in the same high school and never left Springfield. Lenny and Carl are friends because they work together. Marge has no real friends because she's isolated by moral superiority and domestic imprisonment. Lisa has no lasting friends because intelligent people escape Springfield, leaving her behind. The show never romanticizes these friendships. They're not based on deep understanding or shared values. They're survival bonds between people trapped in the same place, making that trap more bearable through shared company. Springfield friendships work not because people choose each other, but because they're the only options available. That's bleaker than typical TV friendship narratives, but it's honest about small-town social dynamics. Springfield's friendships prove that small-town life creates bonds based more on availability than compatibility, and those relationships, dysfunctional as they are, become lifelines in an isolating town where escaping means leaving everyone behind. Now that we've explored the personal relationships that hold Springfield together, let's talk about the institutions that supposedly govern the town but actually enable its dysfunction. Starting with law enforcement, under Chief Wiggum's spectacularly incompetent leadership. Holidays in Springfield. Springfield's holidays reveal the town's true character by turning every celebration into an opportunity for dysfunction, greed, and exposing what the community really values. Simpson's roasting on an open fire establishes the pattern in the very first episode when Christmas becomes a financial crisis rather than a spiritual celebration. Homer's Christmas bonus gets canceled. Marge's holiday savings disappear, paying to remove Bart's tattoo. The family can't afford presents. Christmas in Springfield isn't about joy or togetherness. It's about economic anxiety and the pressure to perform happiness while drowning in debt. Homer takes a secret second job as a mall Santa to earn money, which represents the American Christmas reality, working extra to afford the holiday that's supposed to be about not working. When Homer's paycheck is exactly $13. After taxes and uniform rental, the episode exposes retail exploitation hiding behind holiday cheer. The family ends up at the dog track gambling their last money on a rescue greyhound named Santa's Little Helper. They don't win money, but they gain a dog, which becomes their Christmas miracle. Springfield Christmas isn't about material abundance. It's about lowering expectations until survival feels like success. The Treehouse of Horror episodes transform Halloween into Springfield's most honest holiday because it's the one day everyone admits the world is horrific. These annual specials let the show drop any pretense of normalcy and explore violence, death, and cosmic horror. Springfield embraces Halloween because it's the holiday that doesn't require fake optimism. Nobody pretends things are fine. Nobody forces cheer. They just accept that existence is terrifying and have fun with it. The Halloween episodes work because they're the only time Springfield's aesthetic matches Springfield's reality. Marge at Be Not Proud examines Christmas through family disappointment and fractured trust. Bart steals a video game because his family can't afford it, gets caught by store security, and destroys Marge's faith in him. The episode turns Christmas into an examination of how economic inequality forces families to choose between giving children what they want and teaching them not to want things. Bart's theft comes from advertising creating desires his family can't fulfill. The resolution involves Bart posing for a family photo, which costs money they don't have, but represents connection money can't buy. Springfield's approach to St. Patrick's Day appears in Homer versus the 18th Amendment, when Prohibition comes to Springfield and immediately creates organized crime. The town celebrates St. Patrick's Day with a parade and massive public drinking. When one accident leads to temporary prohibition, Springfield's response reveals how deeply alcohol is woven into their culture. They can't celebrate without drinking. They can't socialize without alcohol. They can't cope with Springfield sober. The holiday becomes an excuse for behavior they engage in daily anyway. Prohibition just removes the veneer of occasion. Bart, After Dark, doesn't focus on a specific holiday, but reveals Springfield's hypocrisy about celebration and morality. When the town discovers a burlesque house, they form a mob to destroy it, while simultaneously being regular customers. Springfield celebrates publicly acceptable holidays with family-friendly traditions while privately celebrating at venues they publicly condemn. Their cultural events exist on two levels: the performative public celebration and the actual private behavior. Every holiday has its official story and its real practice. The show treats most holidays as pressure points exposing existing family tensions rather than magical times bringing people together. Thanksgiving means forced family meals where resentments surface. Christmas means economic stress and gift obligation. Halloween means property destruction disguised as tradition. Valentine's Day means romantic disappointment and commercial exploitation. Springfield's holidays consistently reveal that celebrations designed to unite communities often highlight exactly what divides them. Grift of the Magi takes Christmas commercialization to its logical extreme when a toy company takes over Springfield Elementary to market products directly to children. The episode exposes how holidays become vehicles for corporate profit rather than cultural meaning. Springfield embraced this transaction. They'll celebrate anything if someone makes it easy and packages it appealingly. The town's willingness to let a corporation control their school to get free education shows how easily commercial interests capture cultural traditions. What makes Springfield's holiday celebrations so revealing is how they expose the gap between holiday mythology and holiday reality. Christmas is supposed to bring families together. It reveals their dysfunction. Thanksgiving is supposed to inspire gratitude. It highlights resentment. Halloween is supposed to be fun scares. It becomes actual vandalism and assault. Every holiday becomes a stress test showing whether Springfield's social bonds can handle pressure. Usually they can't. But here's what's real about Springfield's holidays. People keep celebrating despite disappointment because the alternative is admitting there's nothing to celebrate. Homer keeps trying to create magical Christmases even though they always fail. Families keep gathering for Thanksgiving despite fighting. Kids keep trick-or-treating despite the dangers. The persistence matters more than the success. Springfield's holidays work not because they unite the community, but because attempting unity is better than accepting isolation. Springfield's holidays prove that celebrations don't bring communities together. They expose existing fractures while providing temporary distraction. From daily dysfunction, every holiday becomes a crisis because Springfield can't even enjoy itself without self-destructing. Yet, they keep celebrating because ritual provides meaning when reality doesn't. Community events. Beyond mandatory holidays, Springfield creates its own community events that actually bring people together through competition and spectacle rather than forced tradition. Trash of the Titans shows how even municipal elections become community events that everyone participates in. When Homer runs for sanitation commissioner against the incumbent, Springfield treats it like the Super Bowl. They hold rallies, debates, and campaign events. Citizens who normally don't care about local politics suddenly have strong opinions about garbage collection. The election matters not because sanitation policy matters, but because the spectacle gives Springfield a shared experience. Homer wins by promising services the city can't afford: garbage collection 24 times per day, cleaning services, and luxury amenities. He bankrupts the sanitation department within a month, but generated genuine community enthusiasm during the campaign. Springfield would rather have exciting dysfunction than boring competence. The event succeeded as entertainment, even though it failed as governance. The Springfield Files creates community through shared paranoia when residents believe aliens are visiting. Everyone has opinions about the UFO sighting. People hold meetings, form investigation groups, and bond over conspiracy theories. The alien encounter becomes Springfield's shared mythology, something they all experienced or heard about that makes them part of a larger story. Even after the alien is revealed as Mr. Burns suffering medical side effects, people prefer believing the exciting lie. The event created community connection that truth can't erase. Springfield's obsession with celebrity visits reveals how desperately they want external validation. When celebrities come to town, Springfield treats them like visiting royalty. Homer at the bat brings professional baseball players to work at the power plant, and the entire town rallies around the company softball team. Suddenly, the power plant represents Springfield's pride rather than its shame. The community unites behind their team, not because they care about softball, but because winning means Springfield matters to someone beyond Springfield. The softball game represents how community events work in small towns. They create temporary shared identity that transcends normal social divisions. Rich and poor, smart and stupid, young and old all root for the same team. Class warfare stops during the game. Workplace exploitation gets ignored. Environmental poisoning gets forgotten. Sports create the unity that institutions can't, because sports offer clear winners and losers without requiring anyone to address systemic problems. The Telltale Head shows how community events can turn destructive when collective enthusiasm becomes mob mentality. Springfield loves its Jebediah Springfield statue so much that when someone beheads it, the entire town forms a literal mob seeking vengeance. The statue represents their shared history and identity. Attacking it means attacking what makes them Springfield. When Bart confesses to the crime, the mob almost kills him before someone points out that violence would prove they don't deserve the founder they're trying to honor. Town meetings function as community events where residents gather to complain collectively. Multiple episodes show these meetings devolving into chaos as citizens interrupt each other, form factions, and derail discussions with personal grievances. But people keep attending because it's their only forum for public participation. The meetings rarely solve problems, but they create shared experiences of dysfunction. Everyone can bond over how useless town meetings are, which becomes its own form of community. Springfield's recurring competitions reveal how the town uses contests to establish hierarchy and identity. Lisa the Beauty Queen examines beauty pageants as community events that reinforce gender norms and class structures while pretending to celebrate talent. Lisa enters the Little Miss Springfield pageant and discovers it's about conformity and appearance rather than actual achievement. The community gathers to watch children perform femininity, and the event succeeds because it confirms existing beliefs about what girls should value. Duff Days and similar festival episodes show Springfield using events to celebrate their worst habits. They gather to drink excessively, eat unhealthily, and engage in behaviors they should probably examine critically. But the festival frame makes excess acceptable. It's tradition, culture, celebration. Springfield turns their dysfunctions into events worth gathering around, which prevents anyone from questioning whether these behaviors should be celebrated. The genius of Springfield's community events is how they create temporary unity without requiring actual change. During events, everyone participates in shared experience that makes them feel connected. After events, they return to isolated lives in a fractured community. The events succeed as distraction rather than solution. Springfield stays dysfunctional, but feels better about the dysfunction, because at least they're dysfunctional together during designated celebration times. What really matters about these events is showing up. Results don't matter. The softball team loses, elections choose terrible candidates, festivals leave hangovers. But attendance creates community. Being physically present with other Springfield residents proves you're part of Springfield, even if Springfield itself is a disaster. The events work because participation is the point, not outcome. Springfield's community events prove that spectacle creates social bonds that substance can't, and shared experience matters more than shared values when building temporary unity in a permanently fractured town. Media influence. Springfield's media deserves discussion because it completely controls what Springfield thinks about itself and the world. Starting with Krusty the Clown as the town's most influential cultural figure, despite being a terrible person. Krusty Gets Busted establishes Krusty's power over Springfield's children and, by extension, their parents. Every kid in Springfield watches Krusty's show. They buy Krusty merchandise. They attend Krusty events. Bart's entire worldview gets shaped by a clown who's openly cynical, exploitative, and contemptuous of his audience. Krusty represents corporate entertainment. He doesn't care about his viewers, but they worship him anyway because he's on TV. The show exposes Krusty's behind-the-scenes reality constantly. He's illiterate, corrupt, addicted to gambling, and treats his staff terribly. He licenses his name to dangerous products that injure children. He fakes his own death for publicity. He's everything parents should protect children from, but Springfield parents let their kids watch because television is the only babysitter they can afford. Krusty's influence reveals how media shapes children when parents are too exhausted or indifferent to provide alternative guidance. What makes Krusty's cultural power so interesting is how it survives every scandal. He gets arrested for armed robbery and Krusty gets busted. His show gets revealed as mindless trash in multiple episodes. He admits he doesn't care about his audience. None of this matters because he's on TV, and being on TV makes him an authority. Springfield trusts Krusty not because he's trustworthy, but because media presence creates credibility independent of actual character or competence. Kent Brockman represents Springfield's news media and how it shapes public opinion through sensationalism rather than information. Dog of Death and countless episodes show Kent manufacturing stories to create fear and drama. He reports every event like it's a crisis. He editorializes constantly. He has no journalistic integrity or commitment to truth. But Springfield believes him because he's on the news, and the news is supposed to be true. Kent's power comes from the authority people project onto media rather than any actual expertise or reliability. Channel 6. News shapes how Springfield understands reality. When Kent reports that something is a crisis, Springfield panics. When he ignores issues, they don't exist in public consciousness. The media doesn't report what's happening in Springfield. It determines what counts as happening. Events that don't get covered might as well not have occurred. Media attention makes things real, and media silence makes them disappear. Radio Bart exposes media's power to manipulate emotion and create false narratives. Bart tricks the town into believing a boy fell down a well using a radio microphone. Springfield immediately rallies with Sting-led benefit concerts and round-the-clock news coverage. Nobody verifies the story. They just believe it because media reports it. When the hoax gets exposed, Springfield learns nothing about media skepticism. They just move on to the next story without questioning how easily they were manipulated. The relationship between media and reality becomes completely distorted in Springfield. Sideshow Bob's Last Gleaming shows how television shapes behavior so completely that Springfield citizens would rather die than live without TV. When Sideshow Bob threatens to detonate a nuclear bomb unless Springfield eliminates television, citizens refuse. They'd rather face nuclear annihilation than give up their screens. Media isn't just entertainment, it's life support for people who can't cope with reality without distraction. Talk radio appears through Birch Barlow, Springfield's conservative talk radio host, who shapes political opinions through conspiracy theories and fear-mongering. Sideshow Bob Roberts shows Barlow convincing Springfield that Sideshow Bob should be released from prison and elected mayor, despite being a convicted attempted murderer. Talk radio works because it tells people what they want to hear and confirms existing biases. Springfield listeners don't want information, they want validation, and Barlow provides it through manufactured outrage and simplified narratives. The media's role in Springfield reveals how information becomes controlled by those who own the channels of communication. Burns owns Channel 6 News, which means negative stories about the power plant get killed or downplayed. Corporate interests control what gets reported and how. Springfield residents consume media believing they're getting objective information when they're actually receiving carefully curated propaganda designed to prevent them from questioning the systems exploiting them. Homer Badman examines how media creates narratives that shape public perception regardless of truth. When Homer gets accused of sexual harassment, The news media turns him into a monster before investigating facts. The public immediately believes the narrative because media presented it authoritatively. When the truth emerges that Homer is innocent, the correction gets minimal coverage. The false story spread faster and further than the truth because sensational narratives outperform accurate but boring realities. What makes Springfield's media so powerful is how completely residents trust sources that consistently prove untrustworthy. They believe Krusty despite him being openly corrupt. They trust Kent Brockman despite his sensationalism. They accept talk radio conspiracies despite no evidence. Media literacy doesn't exist in Springfield because questioning media means questioning the primary lens through which they understand their world. It's easier to trust the screen than to confront that you've been lied to your entire life. Bart's relationship with Krusty becomes the show's way of exploring parasocial relationships and how media creates false intimacy. Bart believes Krusty is his friend because he watches the show daily. When Krusty treats him terribly in person, Bart keeps defending him because the TV version of Krusty matters more than the real person. Media creates relationships that feel real but only flow one direction. Springfield residents think they know these media figures when they only know carefully constructed personas. The show's most subversive media commentary might be how it presents itself. The Simpsons is Springfield's media, exposing how media works while being media that shapes viewers' reality. The show criticizes media manipulation while manipulating viewers. It mocks how people believe what they see on screens while hoping viewers believe what they're seeing. That self-awareness makes the critique sharper because it admits complicity in the system it's criticizing. Springfield's media proves that communities believe what they're told to believe when media controls information flow, and the power to shape narratives becomes the power to shape reality itself. Krusty is beloved despite being awful. News is trusted despite being propaganda, and Springfield remains incapable of questioning the screens that define their understanding of themselves and the world. Now that we've explored how Springfield celebrates and consumes media, let's examine how the community actually functions day to day through its social hierarchies, crisis responses, and the few people who genuinely try to improve things despite facing systematic resistance. Social hierarchy and class. Springfield has a brutal class system that nobody talks about but everyone enforces, and the divisions determine everything from where you live to whether your kids have futures. Mr. Burns sits at the absolute top with wealth so vast he can't even track it. The Mansion family shows Burns living in a mansion with dozens of rooms he's never entered, employing staff he doesn't know by name, owning businesses he forgot about. His wealth isn't just large, it's incomprehensible to everyone below him. Below Burns sits a tiny upper class of doctors, lawyers, and successful business owners who have money but not power. Dr. Hibbert lives comfortably, but still answers to Burns when the power plant provides funding for the hospital. The upper middle class includes people like the Flanders family, who have financial security through Ned's successful leftorium business and carefully managed finances. Ned represents what middle-class life is supposed to look like. Stable income, owned home, college fund for kids, retirement savings. But his prosperity makes him an outsider. The Simpsons and most of Springfield resent Ned not because he's rich, but because he has what they don't, and his success reminds them of their failure. His niceness makes it worse because they can't even hate him properly. The Allied working class forms Springfield's majority, and they're subdivided by the type of work they do. Homer has a union job at the power plant with benefits and security, which makes him middle working class. Moe runs his own business but barely survives, putting him lower. Barney has no job at all, living on disability or family money, which places him at the bottom of the working class. These distinctions matter tremendously to people who have almost nothing. Being slightly above someone else provides the only status available. Homer the Great exposes Springfield's real power structure through the Stonecutters, a secret society controlling everything from behind the scenes. When Homer accidentally becomes their leader, he discovers that this organization of middle-aged white men determines who succeeds in Springfield. They rig elections, fix business deals, control licensing boards, and ensure their members get advantages everyone else can't access. The stonecutters represent how real power works, not through official channels, but through networks of connected people who help each other while excluding outsiders. The episode reveals that Homer's father, Abe, was a stonecutter, which got Homer consideration he wouldn't have received otherwise. Family connections matter more than merit. Lenny and Carl are stonecutters despite being power plant workers, because someone sponsored them. Principal Skinner tried joining but got rejected despite being a war veteran, which shows the organization values loyalty to existing members over actual achievement or character. Class mobility is essentially impossible in Springfield. Lisa versus Malibu Stacy and other episodes show Lisa discovering that intelligence and hard work don't actually lead to success. Connections and luck do. She's smarter than everyone in Springfield, but that won't help her escape unless she physically leaves town. Bart will probably work at the power plant, like Homer. Maggie will probably marry young, like Marge. Your class at birth determines your class at death, because the systems that should enable mobility are controlled by people who benefit from keeping everyone in their place. The show's treatment of poverty reveals Springfield's contempt for its lowest class. Cletus and his family live in complete destitution, treated as comic relief rather than a crisis. The town mocks them for being poor while simultaneously ensuring they stay poor through lack of education, health care, and opportunity. When Cletus runs for office or tries to improve his situation, Springfield treats it as laughable. The poor exist to make the working class feel superior and to serve as warning about what happens if you fall further. Springfield's housing segregation reflects class divisions physically. The nice houses sit in specific neighborhoods with good schools and low crime. Working-class families like the Simpsons live in middle areas with adequate but declining infrastructure. The poor live in trailer parks and slums that Springfield pretends don't exist, except when needing to feel superior. Burns owns much of the rental property, which means he controls housing access and can evict people who displease him. The country club episodes show how upper classes maintain separation. Scenes from the class struggle in Springfield has Marge briefly accessing upper-class spaces through borrowed designer clothes. She discovers these people are miserable despite their wealth, but they protect their misery jealously. When Marge's clothing is exposed as fake, she gets ejected immediately. The message is clear: you can visit upper-class spaces temporarily, but you'll never belong unless you were born there. Education perpetuates class divisions rather than challenging them. Springfield Elementary provides adequate education for working-class kids to become working-class adults. The school doesn't prepare students for elite colleges or professional careers, because that's not their designated role. Lisa's intelligence might let her escape, but she's the rare exception proving the rule. Bart's mediocrity will keep him in Springfield. The system works exactly as designed, educating workers to replace their parents without questioning why they're workers at all. What makes Springfield's class system so effective is how invisible it remains to people trapped within it. Homer doesn't think of himself as working class. He has a house and a car, so he must be middle class. He doesn't recognize that middle class means security and mobility he'll never have. His house is mortgaged, his car constantly breaks down, one medical emergency would bankrupt him, and he'll never retire comfortably. But comparing himself to people below him like Moe or Barney makes him feel successful. The really insidious part is how the working class attacks itself instead of challenging the wealthy. Homer resents Flanders more than Burns. He's angry about immigrants taking jobs rather than Burns keeping wages low. He blames other poor people for taking government benefits rather than rich people for not paying taxes. Springfield's class warfare happens horizontally between workers fighting for scraps rather than vertically against the people hoarding resources. Springfield's class system proves that American social mobility is mythology disguising rigid hierarchy, and where you start determines where you end, because the people with power actively prevent movement that would threaten their position. Crisis response and mob mentality. Springfield's crisis responses reveal how quickly community spirit becomes violent mob mentality when people get scared or angry. and rationality disappears faster than you'd think possible. The Springfield Files shows the pattern when Homer reports seeing an alien. The town immediately panics. People form watch groups, arm themselves, and prepare for invasion. Nobody verifies Homer's story or considers alternative explanations. They just accept that aliens are attacking and respond with fear and violence. When the alien turns out to be Mr. Burns suffering medical side effects, nobody apologizes for their paranoia. They just move on to the next crisis. Bart's comet takes crisis response further when a comet threatens to destroy Springfield. The town builds a bomb shelter that can only hold a few people. Ned Flanders built it, so he gets to decide who enters. Everyone begs for admission, promising favors and making threats. When Ned lets everyone in except himself, because Christian charity demands self-sacrifice, the townsfolk immediately kick him out to make room. They're willing to let the kindest person in Springfield die to save themselves. Community values disappear the instant survival is threatened. The shelter scene exposes Springfield's true priorities through debate about who deserves survival. Should they save valuable people like doctors? Should they save young people with futures? Should they save people with special skills? They can't agree on criteria because everyone wants to be the exception. Homer argues loudly that he deserves to survive without explaining why. Barney passes out drunk, but they keep him because nobody wants to drag him outside. The debate is really about establishing hierarchy during crisis. Who has power to determine who lives and who dies? Then Ned's decency shames them into leaving the shelter to die together with him. They're willing to die with dignity rather than live with the guilt of sacrificing Ned. But this nobility lasts exactly until the comet disintegrates harmlessly overhead. The moment danger passes, everyone congratulates themselves for moral courage they only showed when survival was guaranteed. Crisis revealed their selfishness, but escaping crisis let them pretend they're better than they are. Marge in Chains shows mob mentality at its most dangerous when a flu epidemic hits Springfield and people panic. When Marge gets arrested for accidentally shoplifting during the chaos, Springfield needs someone to blame for their suffering. They form a literal mob with torches and pitchforks demanding someone be punished. The mob doesn't care about Marge's actual guilt or innocence. They need a target for their fear and anger. When the mob storms the mayor's office demanding action, Quimby immediately releases Marge to placate them because mob justice trumps actual justice when the mob is big enough. The mob then decides they need a cure for the flu, so they go to the hospital and demand the doctor give them something. When he says there's no cure for the flu, they riot and destroy medical equipment. Their desperation makes them destroy the exact resources that could help them. The mob has no plan beyond venting rage at anyone who can't immediately solve their problems. When someone suggests getting help from an adjacent town, the mob burns down the truck carrying supplies because it came from their rivals. They'd rather suffer than accept help from people they've declared enemies. Homer's Enemy reveals how Springfield celebrates mediocrity as a group defense mechanism against anyone who threatens the established order. When Frank Grimes points out that Homer is incompetent and dangerous, Springfield collectively rejects Grimes rather than examining Homer. Grimes represents merit-based standards that would condemn most of Springfield as failures. Accepting his critique would mean admitting their lives are based on settling for inadequacy. Rejecting Grimes means protecting the comfortable delusion that everyone's doing fine. At his funeral, they laugh about how crazy he was for expecting competence to matter. The mob enforces shared mediocrity by destroying anyone who demands better. Bart After Dark shows the mob turning on the burlesque house when it becomes publicly controversial. The same men who've been customers for years suddenly join the mob, trying to destroy it because their wives found out. The mob forms not because the burlesque house is actually problematic, but because being seen opposing it provides social cover for their hypocrisy. Springfield mobs often form around performative morality, publicly opposing things they privately participate in to maintain social status. What makes Springfield's mob mentality so dangerous is how leadership emerges during crisis. The loudest person becomes the leader regardless of actual competence or moral authority. Homer has led multiple mobs simply by yelling first. Moe has directed mob violence by suggesting targets. Nobody asks whether mob leaders are qualified. The mob follows whoever most loudly articulates their fear and anger. Leadership during crisis comes from tapping rage rather than providing wisdom. The show understands that mobs form when people feel powerless individually, but powerful collectively. Springfield residents have no individual power against Burns, Quimby, or institutions that exploit them. But as a mob, they can destroy things. The destruction is usually misdirected. They attack immigrants rather than Burns, burn down public property rather than challenging Quimby. But the mob makes them feel powerful briefly, even if that power accomplishes nothing productive. The Telltale Head captures the aftermath of mob mentality when Bart confesses to beheading the Jebediah Springfield statue. The mob about to kill him suddenly realizes that mob violence would dishonor the founder they're avenging. The moment of self-awareness stops the violence, but nobody actually changes. The next crisis will generate another mob because the pattern is deeper than individual moments of clarity. Springfield keeps forming mobs because mob mentality is easier than addressing systemic problems that make people feel so powerless they need mob catharsis. Crisis responses prove that civilization is paper-thin in Springfield. The moment fear enters the equation, the town abandons reason for mob violence and scapegoating. But these explosions of mob insanity come from rational people driven to irrationality by legitimate powerlessness. They form mobs because mobs are the only collective action Springfield knows. Community heroes and reformers. Despite Springfield's dysfunction, some residents genuinely try to make things better, and their persistent failure reveals why idealism gets crushed by systems designed to resist change. Lisa Simpson is Springfield's most consistent voice for reform, and Mr. Lisa Goes to Washington shows her discovering how thoroughly corruption has captured every system she believed in. She wins an essay contest about American democracy by writing idealistically about representative government. Then she discovers her congressman taking bribes to approve illegal logging. Her faith shatters completely. If the people supposed to protect democracy are selling it, what hope exists for reform? Lisa's response is to write a new essay exposing the corruption. She reads it publicly, shaming the congressman into resignation. For a moment, reform seems possible, but the replacement congressman will be equally corrupt because the system rewards corruption. Lisa won the battle, but lost the war because individual bad actors are symptoms of structural problems she can't fix at 8 years old. Every time Lisa tries to reform Springfield, she discovers the problem is bigger and deeper than she thought. Lisa the Vegetarian shows her environmental activism running into Springfield's meat-centered culture. She becomes vegetarian after ethical awakening at a petting zoo. Instead of supporting her choice, Springfield treats it as a personal attack on their way of life. Homer builds a giant pig roast. Her classmates mock her. Even Apu, a fellow vegetarian, tells her that changing others is impossible. You just survive in the world that exists. Lisa learns that moral correctness doesn't create change. It creates isolation. Her persistence matters despite constant failure. Lisa keeps trying to improve Springfield even though nothing ever permanently improves. She fights environmental destruction, exposes historical lies, challenges gender discrimination, opposes animal cruelty, and advocates for dozens of causes. She loses every fight eventually, but she keeps fighting because someone has to. Her heroism isn't in winning, it's in refusing to accept dysfunction as inevitable. Marge's reform attempts come from a different place. She wants Springfield to be safe and decent for her children. Marge versus the monorail has her opposing the monorail project because she recognizes it as a scam. Leonard Nimoy and smooth-talking con artists convince everyone else that the monorail is progress. Marge is the only person asking basic questions about funding, maintenance, and safety. Her skepticism saves the town from catastrophic disaster, but nobody thanks her afterward because preventing disaster is less visible than causing excitement. Itchy and Scratchy and Marge shows her organizing against violent cartoons after Maggie imitates the violence. She successfully pressures the network to make the show less violent. For a brief moment, reform works. The show becomes educational and boring. But then Marge realizes censorship is wrong, even when she agrees with the goal. She protests a Michelangelo exhibit after campaigning against cartoon violence, and her coalition collapses because her principles prevent her from being a consistent moral crusader. She can't reform Springfield through censorship because she's too principled to become an authoritarian. Ned Flanders represents religious charity as reform method. He genuinely tries to help everyone without expecting anything back. Hurricane Neddy reveals his deep psychological damage, but also his committed kindness despite that damage. When the hurricane destroys his house, he expects community support because he's helped everyone. The community rebuilds his house terribly because they don't actually care about him. They just wanted to feel good about helping. Ned's charity is one-directional. Springfield takes, but doesn't reciprocate. His reform efforts fail because Christianity in Springfield is performative rather than practical. People attend church but don't live Christian values. Ned actually tries to love his neighbor, forgive enemies, and serve the poor. That genuine faith makes him weird rather than admirable. Springfield wants the comfort of religious identity without the uncomfortable demands of religious practice. Ned's example condemns them, so they mock him to avoid self-examination. Trash of the Titans shows how reformers get crushed by the democratic process itself. Homer runs for sanitation commissioner on impossible promises. When challenged by the incumbent about feasibility, Homer dismisses concerns with showmanship. The incumbent commissioner tries running on competence and experience. Voters choose Homer because exciting lies beat boring truth. Democracy failed not because votes were miscounted, but because voters preferred fantasy to reality. The reformer telling hard truths can't compete with the demagogue selling dreams. What makes Springfield's reformers so tragic is how their efforts sometimes make things worse. Lisa's vegetarianism doesn't reduce meat consumption. It makes Homer build a bigger pig roast. Marge's cartoon censorship doesn't reduce violence. It creates a coalition of censorious moralists she has to oppose. Ned's charity doesn't inspire reciprocity. It gets exploited. Their goodness creates reactions that prove why cynicism seems more rational than idealism. The show respects their persistence without guaranteeing success. Lisa will keep fighting losing battles. Marge will keep trying to protect her family from Springfield's dysfunction. Ned will keep serving people who treat him terribly. Their heroism is showing up despite knowing they'll probably fail. That's harder than heroism, where good defeats evil because it requires maintaining hope without evidence that hope is justified. Lisa's Rival and similar episodes show Lisa discovering that reform requires allies. When she meets Allison, another smart girl, she initially sees competition rather than partnership. But effective reform needs coalitions. Individual heroes get crushed by systems designed to isolate and exhaust them. The tragedy is that Springfield's reformers can't work together because they're too busy surviving to organize. Lisa fights alone. Marge fights alone. Ned helps alone. They never form movements because movements require time and energy they don't have. Springfield's reformers prove that institutional inertia defeats individual goodness every time, and heroism becomes simply refusing to stop trying, despite knowing you'll probably lose. But their efforts matter, because they establish that better worlds are imaginable, even if Springfield never becomes one. Now that we've explored how Springfield functions as a community, its classes, its crisis responses, its heroes, let's talk about what this show means beyond entertainment and how The Simpsons shaped an entire generation's understanding of American life. The Simpsons' Cultural Revolution. Now, to finish it off, let's talk about The Simpsons' legacy and how this show about a dysfunctional family in a small town basically changed television forever and shaped how multiple generations see the world. When The Simpsons premiered in December 1989, primetime animation meant the Flintstones reruns and maybe some holiday specials. Cartoons were for kids. Adults watched live-action sitcoms where problems got resolved in 30 minutes and families loved each other without complication. The Simpsons destroyed that entire paradigm, by proving animated shows could be smarter, darker, and more culturally relevant than anything live-action TV was producing. The show's revolutionary aspect wasn't just that adults watched cartoons, it was that cartoons could criticize American culture more effectively than prestige dramas. Animation freed the writers from celebrity ego, budget constraints, and network nervousness about controversial content. They could show a nuclear power plant poisoning a town without worrying about set construction costs. They could mock presidents without libel concerns. They could maintain characters at fixed ages while commenting on decades of cultural change. Animation became the perfect vehicle for social satire because its unreality made truth-telling possible. Matt Groening created the show, but the writing staff transformed it into cultural phenomenon. The early seasons featured writers who'd later create or run shows like The Office, Parks and Recreation, and Arrested Development. They treated comedy writing as literature, packing episodes with references that rewarded educated viewers while remaining accessible to everyone. A single episode might reference The Godfather, Tennessee Williams, and contemporary politics, while telling a story about Homer buying a gun. That density made The Simpsons endlessly rewatchable. You caught new jokes on the fifth viewing. The show's impact on television animation can't be overstated. Before The Simpsons, there was no adult animation industry. After The Simpsons, networks desperately sought animated shows for adults. South Park, Family Guy, King of the Hill, Futurama, Bob's Burgers, Rick and Morty, none of these shows exist without The Simpsons proving the market. Even shows that rejected The Simpsons' approach defined themselves against it. Adult animation became a genre because one show demonstrated that cartoons could tackle subjects sitcoms couldn't touch. But The Simpsons' cultural influence extends far beyond television. The show created a language for discussing American dysfunction that people still use decades later. When politicians prove corrupt, we reference Mayor Quimby. When corporations exploit workers, we invoke Mr. Burns. When education fails, we think of Springfield Elementary. The show gave us vocabulary for criticizing systems that deserve criticism. You can explain complex social problems by referencing Simpsons episodes because everyone knows the references and understands what they mean. The controversy around the show reveals how threatening it was to conservative America. George H.W. Bush famously said, "America needed to be more like the Waltons and less like the Simpsons." He meant it as criticism, but it perfectly captured why the show mattered. The Waltons presented idealized American families solving problems through virtue and hard work. The Simpsons presented real American families barely surviving systems designed to exploit them. Bush's discomfort proved the show was doing something important, making audiences question whether the American dream actually existed or if it was mythology disguising systemic failure. The merchandising explosion around The Simpsons created new economics for television. Bart Simpson t-shirts saying "underachiever" and "proud of it" became cultural flashpoints. Schools banned the shirts. Parents worried the show promoted bad values. But kids loved Bart because he represented rebellion against authority that demanded respect without earning it. The merchandise controversy proved The Simpsons wasn't just entertainment. It was cultural battleground where Americans fought over what values their children should internalize. The show's longevity itself became culturally significant. Most sitcoms run 5 to 10 years before exhausting their premise. The Simpsons has been producing episodes for over 3 decades, making it the longest-running American sitcom in history. That longevity created strange temporal dynamics where the show that once felt cutting edge became the establishment. Early episodes mocked Fox Network's trashiness. Now, The Simpsons is Fox's most prestigious property. The Rebel became the institution, which is either ironic perfection or depressing sellout depending on your perspective. Critics endlessly debate when The Simpsons declined from peak quality. Most agree seasons 3 through 8 represent television perfection. After that, opinions vary wildly on when it became bad and whether it's still worth watching. But this debate itself proves cultural importance. People care deeply about The Simpsons' quality because the show matters to them personally. It's not just entertainment they consumed, it's cultural touchstone that shaped how they see the world. The show's prediction accuracy became its own phenomenon. Episodes predicted Trump's presidency, smartwatches, autocorrect, and dozens of other future developments. These aren't mystical prophecies. They're satire so grounded in understanding American culture that exaggerations became reality. When The Simpsons mocked Trump running for president as absurd joke, they understood American politics well enough to imagine the unimaginable. The predictions work because good satire sees where trends lead before reality catches up. What makes The Simpsons' cultural revolution complete is how it changed what television could be. Before The Simpsons, sitcoms had laugh tracks, limited episode runs, and avoided serialization. After The Simpsons, shows could trust audiences to get jokes without prompting, produce 20-plus episodes annually, and build complex continuity. The show proved audiences were smarter than networks assumed and would reward shows that respected their intelligence. Modern prestige television owes debt to The Simpsons, demonstrating that popular entertainment could be artistically ambitious. The show's greatest achievement might be giving multiple generations shared cultural language that transcends politics, class, and geography. Conservatives and liberals both quote The Simpsons. Rich and poor people reference episodes. Americans and international audiences connect through Springfield. The show created common ground in increasingly divided culture by making everyone laugh at the same American absurdities. That shared laughter doesn't solve problems, but it reminds people they're seeing the same dysfunction even when they disagree about solutions. The Simpsons didn't just entertain, it gave us a language for critiquing American life while making us laugh at our own failures. Springfield became a mirror showing us our own dysfunction, and we kept watching, because recognizing your problems is the first step toward fixing them, even if Springfield never actually fixes anything. Meme culture and internet legacy. The Simpsons basically invented meme culture before the internet made memes ubiquitous, and the show's visual and verbal quotability made it perfect source material for how people communicate online. Think about how many ways The Simpsons infiltrated daily conversation. Dough entered the Oxford English Dictionary. Eat my shorts became catchphrase. Don't have a cow, man, dated itself, but demonstrated how TV could create slang. The show taught audiences that entertainment could provide vocabulary for expressing emotions and ideas that regular language couldn't capture as efficiently. The early internet era saw Simpsons fans creating websites cataloging every joke, reference, and continuity error. These fan communities developed the frameworks for how internet fandoms would operate: obsessive cataloging, ranking episodes, debating quality decline, sharing favorite moments. Simpsons fans created the template for online fan culture before social media made it mainstream. The passion for documenting everything about the show revealed how deeply it mattered to people who grew up with it as their primary lens for understanding American culture. When social media exploded, The Simpsons became the internet's favorite source for reaction images and memes. Nearly every human emotion or situation has corresponding Simpsons screen cap that expresses it perfectly. Feeling disappointed? Post Homer backing into bushes? Experiencing schadenfreude? Post Nelson saying, haha? Recognizing hypocrisy? Post Old Man yells at cloud. The show's 30-plus years of episodes created vast library of moments that could be repurposed for any context. Meme culture needed content library that deep to function, and The Simpsons provided it. The Simpsons did it phenomenon became cultural shorthand for how the show predicted or parodied everything first. South Park even devoted an episode to the concept, acknowledging that The Simpsons' longevity meant they'd covered every possible story idea. But beyond narrative, The Simpsons did visual gags, social critiques, and character dynamics that later shows borrowed or subverted. The show's influence is so complete that avoiding it became its own achievement. Modern animated comedies define themselves by what they do differently from The Simpsons, because imitating it directly is impossible. Younger generations discovered The Simpsons through memes before watching full episodes, which created fascinating dynamic where the show's cultural impact exceeded its actual viewership. Teenagers who never watched The Simpsons regularly still understood Simpsons references because memes made them cultural literacy. You didn't need to watch the show to participate in Simpsons culture. You just needed internet access. This separated the show from its source material, making it bigger than television could contain. The meme economy around The Simpsons reveals which aspects of the show resonate most strongly. Memes rarely come from sentimental moments or moral lessons. They come from Homer's stupidity, Burns's evil, Bart's rebellion, and Lisa's frustration. The cynical and absurd moments generate more memes than the heartwarming ones, because they better capture how people actually feel about modern life. Internet culture embraced The Simpsons' darkness while ignoring its occasional optimism, which says something about what resonated with meme creating generations. Simpsons shitposting became its own art form where fans deliberately misquote episodes, create fake screen caps, and generate absurdist humor from the show's visual style. These aren't simple memes. They're creative works using the Simpsons aesthetic to generate new comedy. The show's art style became language that people fluent in Simpsons culture could manipulate to create meaning. This represents ultimate cultural penetration, when your aesthetic becomes tool for others to create their own art. Reddit's Simpsons communities contain millions of members sharing favorite moments, debating episodes, and keeping the show's legacy alive years after many stopped watching new episodes. The passion for early Simpsons created preservation culture, where fans maintain what they consider the show's peak quality in perpetuity. These communities function as museums and discussion forums, ensuring that even if new episodes disappoint, the classic era remains accessible and celebrated. The show's quotability explains its meme dominance. Nearly every line is written for maximum punch, making episodes extremely gifable and shareable. Writers crafted jokes to land quickly and memorably, which accidentally created perfect meme material decades before memes existed. The economy of language that made jokes work in 1992 made them perfect for Twitter in 2015. Good writing remains good writing regardless of platform. International audiences participate in Simpsons meme culture despite translation complications, proving the show's visual comedy transcends language. Homer's expressions communicate without words. Burns's physical appearance conveys evil universally. The animation style is so distinctive that even without dialogue, you recognize Simpsons content immediately. That visual language made the show globally accessible in ways live-action shows couldn't achieve. The Simpsons' meme dominance proves the show captured something universal about modern life. The feeling of being trapped in systems you can't control, the humor in acknowledging dysfunction instead of denying it, the comfort in shared frustration expressed through perfect reaction image. When you need to express complex emotion quickly online, there's probably a Simpsons screen cap that does it better than words could. That's cultural immortality. Lessons and lasting impact. At the end of the day, The Simpsons did something really special beyond just making people laugh for 3 decades. The show taught that dysfunction doesn't mean lack of love, that families can be both terrible and devoted to each other, and that criticizing systems you're trapped in beats pretending everything's fine. Homer strangles Bart, but would die protecting him. Marge enables Homer's drinking, but genuinely loves him. The family is disaster by conventional standards, but they're disaster together, which counts for something. The show's lasting lesson might be that it's okay to be imperfect. Springfield is full of failures, addicts, criminals, and incompetence, but they're human and trying their best with limited tools. That acceptance of human limitation without excusing human cruelty became The Simpsons' greatest gift to audiences. You can acknowledge that Homer's a terrible father while recognizing he's doing better than his father did. You can criticize Springfield's corruption while understanding why people stay. Nuance in comedy was rare before The Simpsons made it standard. The show shaped entire generations' understanding of authority and institutions. Millennials and Gen Z grew up watching The Simpsons expose how corporations exploit workers, how media manipulates opinion, how government serves the wealthy, and how institutions fail the people they're supposed to protect. This wasn't abstract political theory. It was Homer getting poisoned by his workplace, Lisa discovering historical lies, Bart being failed by schools that couldn't teach him. The Simpsons provided framework for understanding systemic failure before kids encountered those systems personally. That critical education created generations more skeptical of authority than their parents. When schools demand respect without earning it, students think of Springfield Elementary. When bosses exploit workers, employees reference Mr. Burns. When politicians make promises, voters remember Mayor Quimby. The show didn't make people cynical. It gave them language for cynicism they already felt. Naming dysfunction helps people recognize it in their own lives, which is first step toward demanding better, even if better rarely arrives. The comfort show phenomenon around The Simpsons reveals its emotional impact beyond intellectual appreciation. People watch classic episodes when depressed, anxious, or seeking stability in chaotic times. The episodes are familiar enough to be soothing, but good enough to remain entertaining after dozens of viewings. Springfield becomes safe space where problems exist but remain contained within 22 minutes. The show comforts not by pretending life is fine, but by acknowledging life is hard and laughing about it anyway. The Simpsons' most subversive achievement might be making anti-capitalism mainstream entertainment. The show consistently portrayed corporate greed, wealth inequality, and worker exploitation while being produced by massive corporation for profit. That contradiction doesn't invalidate the criticism. It proves the criticism was compelling enough to sell. Fox made billions broadcasting show that mocked everything Fox represents. That's either brilliant subversion or perfect recuperation of criticism into commodity, probably both simultaneously. The family's endurance despite everything matters more than any individual episode or joke. They've been through thousands of adventures, died and returned countless times, experienced every possible scenario. But they remain together, still living in Springfield, still dealing with the same problems. That persistence models resilience without demanding optimism. You don't have to believe things will get better to keep showing up for the people who matter. The Simpsons survive not by fixing their problems, but by refusing to abandon each other despite their problems. The show's legacy is giving multiple generations a common language for understanding American life, shared cultural references that transcend demographics, and permission to laugh at dysfunction while acknowledging it's real. Springfield became America in miniature, flawed, corrupt, often cruel, occasionally beautiful, and populated by people doing their best in systems designed to break them. The Simpsons didn't solve anything, but they helped millions of people feel less alone in recognizing that the American dream might be mythology, disguising something much more complicated and much more real. The Simpsons' cultural revolution. Now, to finish it off, let's talk about The Simpsons' legacy and how this show about a dysfunctional family in a small town basically changed television forever and shaped how multiple generations see the world. When The Simpsons premiered in December 1989, primetime animation meant the Flintstones reruns and maybe some holiday specials. Cartoons were for kids. Adults watched live-action sitcoms where problems got resolved in 30 minutes, and families loved each other without complication. The Simpsons destroyed that entire paradigm by proving animated shows could be smarter, darker, and more culturally relevant than anything live-action TV was producing. The show's revolutionary aspect wasn't just that adults watched cartoons, it was that cartoons could criticize American culture more effectively than prestige dramas. Animation freed the writers from celebrity ego, budget constraints, and network nervousness about controversial content. They could show a nuclear power plant poisoning a town without worrying about set construction costs. They could mock presidents without libel concerns. They could maintain characters at fixed ages while commenting on decades of cultural change. Animation became the perfect vehicle for social satire because its unreality made truth-telling possible. Matt Groening created the show, but the writing staff transformed it into cultural phenomenon. The early seasons featured writers who'd later create or run shows like The Office, Parks and Recreation, and Arrested Development. They treated comedy writing as literature, packing episodes with references that rewarded educated viewers while remaining accessible to everyone. A single episode might reference The Godfather, Tennessee Williams, and contemporary politics while telling a story about Homer buying a gun. That density made The Simpsons endlessly rewatchable. You caught new jokes on the fifth viewing. The show's impact on television animation can't be overstated. Before The Simpsons, there was no adult animation industry. After The Simpsons, networks desperately sought animated shows for adults. South Park, Family Guy, King of the Hill, Futurama, Bob's Burgers, Rick and Morty, none of these shows exist without The Simpsons proving the market. Even shows that rejected The Simpsons' approach defined themselves against it. Adult animation became a genre because one show demonstrated that cartoons could tackle subjects sitcoms couldn't touch. But The Simpsons' cultural influence extends far beyond television. The show created a language for discussing American dysfunction that people still use decades later. When politicians prove corrupt, we reference Mayor Quimby. When corporations exploit workers, we invoke Mr. Burns. When education fails, we think of Springfield Elementary. The show gave us vocabulary for criticizing systems that deserve criticism. You can explain complex social problems by referencing Simpsons episodes, because everyone knows the references and understands what they mean. The controversy around the show reveals how threatening it was to conservative America. George H.W. Bush famously said America needed to be more like the Waltons and less like the Simpsons. He meant it as criticism, but it perfectly captured why the show mattered. The Waltons presented idealized American families solving problems through virtue and hard work. The Simpsons presented real American families barely surviving systems designed to exploit them. Bush's discomfort proved the show was doing something important, making audiences question whether the American dream actually existed or if it was mythology disguising systemic failure. The merchandising explosion around The Simpsons created new economics for television. Bart Simpson t-shirts saying underachiever and proud of it became cultural flashpoints. Schools banned the shirts. Parents worried the show promoted bad values. But kids loved Bart because he represented rebellion against authority that demanded respect without earning it. The merchandise controversy proved The Simpsons wasn't just entertainment, it was cultural battleground where Americans fought over what values their children should internalize. The show's longevity itself became culturally significant. Most sitcoms run 5 to 10 years before exhausting their premise. The Simpsons has been producing episodes for over 3 decades, making it the longest-running American sitcom in history. That longevity created strange temporal dynamics where the show that once felt cutting edge became the establishment. Early episodes mocked Fox Network's trashiness. Now The Simpsons is Fox's most prestigious property. The Rebel became the institution, which is either ironic perfection or depressing sellout depending on your perspective. Critics endlessly debate when The Simpsons declined from peak quality. Most agree seasons 3 through 8 represent television perfection. After that, opinions vary wildly on when it became bad and whether it's still worth watching. But this debate itself proves cultural importance. People care deeply about The Simpsons' quality because the show matters to them personally. It's not just entertainment they consumed, it's cultural touchstone that shaped how they see the world. The show's prediction accuracy became its own phenomenon. Episodes predicted Trump's presidency, smartwatches, autocorrect, and dozens of other future developments. These aren't mystical prophecies. They're satire so grounded in understanding American culture that exaggerations became reality. When The Simpsons mocked Trump running for president as absurd joke, they understood American politics well enough to imagine the unimaginable. The predictions work because good satire sees where trends lead before reality catches up. What makes The Simpsons' cultural revolution complete is how it changed what television could be. Before The Simpsons, sitcoms had laugh tracks, limited episode runs, and avoided serialization. After The Simpsons, shows could trust audiences to get jokes without prompting, produce 20-plus episodes annually, and build complex continuity. The show proved audiences were smarter than networks assumed and would reward shows that respected their intelligence. Modern prestige television owes debt to The Simpsons, demonstrating that popular entertainment could be artistically ambitious. The show's greatest achievement might be giving multiple generations shared cultural language that transcends politics, class, and geography. Conservatives and liberals both quote The Simpsons. Rich and poor people reference episodes. Americans and international audiences connect through Springfield. The show created common ground in increasingly divided culture by making everyone laugh at the same American absurdities. That shared laughter doesn't solve problems, but it reminds people they're seeing the same dysfunction even when they disagree about solutions. The Simpsons didn't just entertain, it gave us a language for critiquing American life while making us laugh at our own failures. Springfield became a mirror showing us our own dysfunction, and we kept watching, because recognizing your problems is the first step toward fixing them, even if Springfield never actually fixes anything. Meme culture and internet legacy. The Simpsons basically invented meme culture before the internet made memes ubiquitous, and the show's visual and verbal quotability made it perfect source material for how people communicate online. Think about how many ways The Simpsons infiltrated daily conversation. Doe entered the Oxford English Dictionary. Eat my shorts became catchphrase. Don't have a cow, man, dated itself, but demonstrated how TV could create slang. The show taught audiences that entertainment could provide vocabulary for expressing emotions and ideas that regular language couldn't capture as efficiently. The early internet era saw Simpsons fans creating websites cataloging every joke, reference, and continuity error. These fan communities developed the frameworks for how internet fandoms would operate. Obsessive cataloging, ranking episodes, debating quality decline, sharing favorite moments. Simpsons fans created the template for online fan culture before social media made it mainstream. The passion for documenting everything about the show revealed how deeply it mattered to people who grew up with it as their primary lens for understanding American culture. When social media exploded, The Simpsons became the internet's favorite source for reaction images and memes. Nearly every human emotion or situation has corresponding Simpsons screen cap that expresses it perfectly. Feeling disappointed? Post Homer backing into bushes, experiencing schadenfreude? Post Nelson saying, haha. Recognizing hypocrisy? Post Old Man yells at cloud. The show's 30-plus years of episodes created vast library of moments that could be repurposed for any context. Meme culture needed content library that deep to function, and The Simpsons provided it. The Simpsons did it phenomenon became cultural shorthand for how the show predicted or parodied everything first. South Park even devoted an episode to the concept, acknowledging that The Simpsons' longevity meant they'd covered every possible story idea. But beyond narrative, The Simpsons did visual gags, social critiques, and character dynamics that later shows borrowed or subverted. The show's influence is so complete that avoiding it became its own achievement. Modern animated comedies define themselves by what they do differently from The Simpsons, because imitating it directly is impossible. Younger generations discovered The Simpsons through memes before watching full episodes, which created fascinating dynamic where the show's cultural impact exceeded its actual viewership. Teenagers who never watched The Simpsons regularly still understood Simpsons references, because memes made them cultural literacy. You didn't need to watch the show to participate in Simpsons culture, you just needed internet access. This separated the show from its source material, making it bigger than television could contain. The meme economy around The Simpsons reveals which aspects of the show resonate most strongly. Memes rarely come from sentimental moments or moral lessons. They come from Homer's stupidity, Burns's evil, Bart's rebellion, and Lisa's frustration. The cynical and absurd moments generate more memes than the heartwarming ones because they better capture how people actually feel about modern life. Internet culture embraced The Simpsons' darkness while ignoring its occasional optimism, which says something about what resonated with meme-creating generations. Simpsons shitposting became its own art form, where fans deliberately misquote episodes, create fake screen caps, and generate absurdist humor from the show's visual style. These aren't simple memes, they're creative works using the Simpsons aesthetic to generate new comedy. The show's art style became language that people fluent in Simpsons culture could manipulate to create meaning. This represents ultimate cultural penetration when your aesthetic becomes tool for others to create their own art. Reddit's Simpsons communities contain millions of members sharing favorite moments, debating episodes, and keeping the show's legacy alive years after many stopped watching new episodes. The passion for early Simpsons created preservation culture, where fans maintain what they consider the show's peak quality in perpetuity. These communities function as museums and discussion forums, ensuring that even if new episodes disappoint, the classic era remains accessible and celebrated. The show's quotability explains its meme dominance. Nearly every line is written for maximum punch, making episodes extremely gifable and shareable. Writers crafted jokes to land quickly and memorably, which accidentally created perfect meme material decades before memes existed. The economy of language that made jokes work in 1992 made them perfect for Twitter in 2015. Good writing remains good writing regardless of platform. International audiences participate in Simpsons meme culture despite translation complications, proving the show's visual comedy transcends language. Homer's expressions communicate without words. Burns's physical appearance conveys evil universally. The animation style is so distinctive that even without dialogue, you recognize Simpsons content immediately. That visual language made the show globally accessible in ways live-action shows couldn't achieve. The Simpsons' meme dominance proves the show captured something universal about modern life. The feeling of being trapped in systems you can't control. The humor in acknowledging dysfunction instead of denying it. The comfort in shared frustration expressed through perfect reaction image. When you need to express complex emotion quickly online, there's probably a Simpsons screen cap that does it better than words could. That's cultural immortality. Lessons and lasting impact. At the end of the day, The Simpsons did something really special beyond just making people laugh for 3 decades. The show taught that dysfunction doesn't mean lack of love, that families can be both terrible and devoted to each other, and that criticizing systems you're trapped in beats pretending everything's fine. Homer strangles Bart, but would die protecting him. Marge enables Homer's drinking, but genuinely loves him. The family is disaster by conventional standards, but they're disaster together, which counts for something. The show's lasting lesson might be that it's okay to be imperfect. Springfield is full of failures, addicts, criminals, and incompetents, but they're human and trying their best with limited tools. That acceptance of human limitation, without excusing human cruelty, became The Simpsons' greatest gift to audiences. You can acknowledge that Homer's a terrible father while recognizing he's doing better than his father did. You can criticize Springfield's corruption while understanding why people stay. Nuance in comedy was rare before The Simpsons made it standard. The show shaped entire generations' understanding of authority and institutions. Millennials and Gen Z grew up watching The Simpsons expose how corporations exploit workers, how media manipulates opinion, how government serves the wealthy, and how institutions fail the people they're supposed to protect. This wasn't abstract political theory, it was Homer getting poisoned by his workplace, Lisa discovering historical lies, Bart being failed by schools that couldn't teach him. The Simpsons provided framework for understanding systemic failure before kids encountered those systems personally. That critical education created generations more skeptical of authority than their parents. When schools demand respect without earning it, students think of Springfield Elementary. When bosses exploit workers, employees reference Mr. Burns. When politicians make promises, voters remember Mayor Quimby. The show didn't make people cynical, it gave them language for cynicism they already felt. Naming dysfunction helps people recognize it in their own lives, which is first step toward demanding better, even if better rarely arrives. The comfort show phenomenon around The Simpsons reveals its emotional impact beyond intellectual appreciation. People watch classic episodes when depressed, anxious, or seeking stability in chaotic times. The episodes are familiar enough to be soothing, but good enough to remain entertaining after dozens of viewings. Springfield becomes safe space where problems exist but remain contained within 22 minutes. The show comforts not by pretending life is fine, but by acknowledging life is hard and laughing about it anyway. The Simpsons' most subversive achievement might be making anti-capitalism mainstream entertainment. The show consistently portrayed corporate greed, wealth inequality, and worker exploitation while being produced by massive corporation for profit. That contradiction doesn't invalidate the criticism. It proves the criticism was compelling enough to sell. Fox made billions broadcasting show that mocked everything Fox represents. That's either brilliant subversion or perfect recuperation of criticism into commodity, probably both simultaneously. The family's endurance despite everything matters more than any individual episode or joke. They've been through thousands of adventures, died and returned countless times, experienced every possible scenario. But they remain together, still living in Springfield, still dealing with the same problems. That persistence models resilience without demanding optimism. You don't have to believe things will get better to keep showing up for the people who matter. The Simpsons survive not by fixing their problems, but by refusing to abandon each other despite their problems. The show's legacy is giving multiple generations a common language for understanding American life, shared cultural references that transcend demographics, and permission to laugh at dysfunction while acknowledging it's real. Springfield became America in miniature, flawed, corrupt, often cruel, occasionally beautiful, and populated by people doing their best in systems designed to break them. The Simpsons didn't solve anything, but they helped millions of people feel less alone in recognizing that the American dream might be mythology, disguising something much more complicated and much more real. If you enjoyed our video, subscribe to our channel for more videos like these.